Hidden beneath layers of dust, stone and time, there exist locations that biblical texts hinted at but left shrouded in obscurity, their stories veiled in fragments of scripture and the whispers of ancient witnesses. From subterranean pools where waters once carried sacred rites, to fortress ruins perched on jagged cliffs overlooking deserts, these places bear silent testimony to civilizations that thrived, vanished, and were almost forgotten. Their presence is tangible yet elusive, inviting questions about the events and people that shaped them, and the secrets still buried within their walls. As you follow the trail through arid deserts, rugged hills and verdant oases, you will traverse the lost city of Bethsaida, explore the labyrinthine tunnels of ancient fortresses, and encounter enigmatic inscriptions etched into stones long abandoned, all while sensing the mystery that continues to linger over these remarkable, tangible echoes of the biblical world. The subterranean pool of Siloam. The southern slope of ancient Jerusalem descends gradually toward a narrow valley where stone houses now press closely together, and the sounds of modern life echo through narrow streets. Beneath this crowded hillside lies one of the city's most important water sources, a spring that sustained Jerusalem thousands of years ago when its earliest inhabitants built walls and towers to protect it. At the base of this slope, hidden for centuries beneath layers of earth and later construction, archaeologists uncovered the long-lost pool of Siloam. The discovery did not occur through careful excavation, but through a broken sewer pipe in 2004, when workers from the Jerusalem Water Authority unexpectedly exposed the edge of a wide stone staircase descending into the ground. The pool of Siloam appears in the Gospel of John, where it is described as the place where Jesus instructed a blind man to wash his eyes in its waters. According to the account in John 9, the man returned from the pool able to see, and the location became linked with a story of healing that unfolded in the crowded streets of ancient Jerusalem. For centuries, scholars assumed the pool mentioned in the Gospel had already been identified in the 19th century, when archaeologists located a smaller Byzantine-era pool nearby. Yet the discovery beneath the hillside revealed something far older and far larger than the structure long believed to mark the biblical site. The newly uncovered pool began to reveal itself slowly as archaeologists cleared debris from the area surrounding the exposed steps. What emerged was not a small basin but a broad ritual pool built from large limestone blocks, its sides formed by 3 long flights of descending steps. Each staircase dropped gradually toward a wide central basin, suggesting that the structure had been designed to accommodate large crowds approaching the water from multiple directions. The architecture immediately pointed to a date during the late Second Temple period, roughly the 1st century before the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, placing the pool precisely within the historical setting of the New Testament. Ancient Jerusalem relied on the nearby Gihon Spring as its primary source of water, and engineers during the reign of King Hezekiah in the 8th century BC carved a long tunnel through solid rock to channel the spring's water safely into the city. That passage, known today as Hezekiah's Tunnel, winds beneath the city of David for more than 500 meters before releasing its water at the lower end of the valley. The Pool of Siloam formed the final destination of that underground channel. Here, the water gathered in a large reservoir, where residents could draw it safely inside the city's defensive perimeter, away from enemy forces that might try to seize the spring during a siege. By the 1st century, the pool had taken on an additional role beyond simple survival. Jewish law required ritual purification before entering the temple complex, and Jerusalem during major festivals drew enormous crowds of pilgrims arriving from across Judea and the wider Roman world. Archaeological evidence suggests that the Pool of Siloam functioned as a mikveh, a ritual bath where visitors cleansed themselves before beginning the steep walk north toward the Temple Mount. From the pool, a monumental stone-paved street extended uphill toward the city's sacred center, forming a processional route used by thousands of pilgrims during festivals such as Passover. The rediscovery of the pool also revealed how deeply ancient Jerusalem still lies buried beneath the modern city. Layers of destruction, rebuilding, and centuries of habitation gradually covered the structure until its true scale disappeared from memory. The Byzantine pool identified in the 19th century had been built several meters above the original basin after the earlier structure fell into ruin. Over time, later generations simply assumed that the smaller pool marked the biblical site. Only when the deeper structure emerged in the 21st century did archaeologists realise that the true pool of Siloam had remained concealed just a short distance away. Excavations conducted by Israeli archaeologists Ronnie Reich and Eli Shukron began soon after the accidental discovery. As they carefully cleared soil from the exposed corner, the outline of the pool expanded outward in 3 directions, revealing the broad triangular shape of the basin. Coins recovered from the lower layers helped establish a date for the pool's final phase of construction during the reign of Alexander Jannaeus, a Hasmonean king who ruled Judea in the 1st century BC. The pool continued to function for roughly a century before the Roman destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD buried much of the surrounding district beneath collapsed stone. The physical setting of the pool adds another layer of intrigue. The basin lies at the meeting point of several ancient valleys that cut through the hills of Jerusalem, a natural convergence where water collected long before the city expanded. Even today, the atmosphere of the place carries a strange stillness compared with the bustling streets above. The steps descend toward water that once flowed steadily from the tunnel carved through bedrock, and standing there, it becomes easier to imagine the quiet movement of pilgrims approaching the pool after long journeys through dusty landscapes. The Gospel description of the blind man walking to Siloam gains an unusual clarity when viewed against the geography of the site. From the temple complex, the route to the pool required a descent through the southern part of the city along a stone-paved street discovered in recent excavations. That road, built with massive flagstones and lined with drainage channels, connected the Sacred Heart of Jerusalem to the water source at the valley floor. The journey described in the Gospel may have taken place along this very path, a route that thousands of people once walked daily between the pool and the temple. Yet the rediscovered pool raises questions that archaeology alone cannot fully answer. Only a portion of the basin has been excavated so far because modern buildings stand above the remaining sections. Beneath those structures, the rest of the pool may still lie preserved, waiting beneath foundations that cannot easily be removed. The surrounding hillside also hides additional tunnels, channels and structures connected to Jerusalem's ancient water system, many of which remain only partially explored. Each discovery suggests that the underground landscape beneath the City of David is far more extensive than once believed. Standing at the edge of the uncovered steps, it becomes clear that the Pool of Siloam was not merely a functional reservoir, but a gathering place woven into the daily life and religious rhythm of ancient Jerusalem. Pilgrims descending toward its waters would have carried the sounds of prayer, conversation and movement through the narrow valley as they prepared to ascend toward the temple. For centuries the pool vanished beneath the weight of history, its presence reduced to a few lines in ancient texts. Only by accident did the earth loosen its hold and reveal the stone steps once more. And somewhere beneath the buildings that still stand above it, the rest of the pool may remain in darkness, silent and waiting beneath the streets of Jerusalem. The hidden tunnels of the City of David. Along the narrow ridge south of Jerusalem's old city, the ground under the modern neighbourhood hides a network of ancient passages known today as the hidden tunnels of the City of David. The slope appears unremarkable at first glance, crowded with stone homes and narrow paths that wind between terraces of limestone. Yet this ridge marks the earliest settlement of Jerusalem, a place where survival once depended on ingenuity as much as faith. Deep within the hillside are narrow corridors carved through bedrock thousands of years ago, passages that allowed the city's inhabitants to move through darkness in order to reach the most valuable resource in the region. In a land defined by dry seasons and fragile springs, control of water meant survival. Long before Jerusalem rose into a fortified capital, survival in this landscape depended on a single source of water emerging from the limestone hillside. That source was the Gihon Spring, a powerful but exposed spring located just outside the earliest city walls. In peaceful times, it sustained the settlement without difficulty, but during war, it became a dangerous weakness. Any army surrounding the city could simply wait beside the spring and deny its water to the people inside the walls. Ancient rulers quickly understood that the city's security could never be stronger than its access to water, and the solution they devised required digging into the rock itself. In the 19th century, a British officer named Charles Warren began lowering himself into the darkness of these buried structures, unknowingly revealing one of the most unusual defensive systems of the ancient world. Working in the 1860s on behalf of the Palestine Exploration Fund, Warren explored narrow shafts and passages cut into the hillside near the Gihon Spring. During one descent, he discovered a steep vertical shaft that connected to an underground tunnel system leading toward the spring chamber. The structure appeared intentionally hidden, suggesting that ancient inhabitants once used it to draw water while remaining protected within the city's defences. Warren's discovery introduced the world to a complex underground feature that later scholars called Warren's Shaft. Inside the rock, the passageways narrow and twist in ways that make the outside world quickly disappear behind shadow and silence. The walls still bear the rough marks of chisels used by workers who carved the corridors directly into the limestone. These passages are not grand architectural spaces, but tight channels designed for function rather than comfort, forcing those who move through them to step carefully along uneven floors. The tunnels eventually lead to the spring chamber, where water once surged from the rock before flowing down toward the valley. During times of siege, the people of Jerusalem could descend through these hidden routes and reach the spring without exposing themselves to enemy archers. During the reign of King Hezekiah in the 8th century BC, the people of Jerusalem undertook an even more ambitious solution to the city's most dangerous vulnerability. The powerful Assyrian Empire was advancing across the region, conquering cities and forcing kingdoms into submission. Anticipating a siege, Hezekiah ordered engineers to carve a long tunnel through the bedrock, redirecting the waters of the Gihon Spring deep inside the city's defences. This project created a winding underground channel that carried water from the spring to a reservoir at the lower end of the city. By hiding the spring's outflow within the walls, Jerusalem could continue receiving water even while enemies waited outside. More than 2,000 years later, a small carved inscription discovered on the wall of that tunnel revealed the voices of the workers who had once chipped their way through the stone. Known today as the Siloam inscription, the text describes the dramatic moment when two teams of diggers approached each other from opposite directions inside the rock. According to the inscription, the workers heard one another calling through the stone as the gap between them narrowed. Finally, the walls gave way and the two passages met, allowing water to flow through the newly completed tunnel. The inscription remains one of the rare surviving records written by the labourers themselves, rather than by kings or officials. Unlike modern tunnels driven by precise measurements, this ancient passage curves unpredictably through the bedrock under the city. Engineers today still debate how the workers managed to guide their excavation through hundreds of meters of solid rock without losing direction. Some scholars suggest that the diggers followed natural fissures in the limestone, while others believe they navigated using sound from the flowing water of the spring. Whatever method they used, the tunnel eventually stretched more than 500 meters in length. Its winding route appears almost hesitant in places, as if the workers were constantly adjusting their direction while searching for the path that would finally connect the two teams. The purpose of these tunnels becomes clearer when imagining Jerusalem during a siege, when enemy armies would have surrounded the hills beyond the walls. Ancient warfare often relied on patience, and cutting off a city's water supply was one of the most effective strategies available to attacking forces. The tunnels of the city of David turned that weakness into a hidden advantage. While enemies waited outside, believing the spring to be under their control, water continued to flow quietly through the underground channel into the protected reservoir. The city above could endure longer than its enemies expected, supported by a hidden lifeline carved through stone. As archaeologists continued excavating the slopes of the city of David in recent decades, they began to understand that the tunnels were only part of a much larger underground landscape. Excavations revealed additional stairways, channels, and chambers connected to the ancient water system. Each discovery added another piece to the story of how Jerusalem's earliest inhabitants reshaped the hillside to protect their most precious resource. The tunnels were not isolated passages, but components of an elaborate system built and modified over centuries. Every new excavation suggested that more hidden features might remain concealed within the rock. Hidden under the streets where biblical kings, priests, and pilgrims once walked lies an ancient infrastructure that shaped the survival of the entire city. Above ground, Jerusalem's history unfolded through battles, religious ceremonies, and royal politics. Below ground, another story was quietly taking place in darkness. where water moved through channels that few people ever saw. These tunnels carried life into the city, while remaining invisible to those who threatened it. Their presence reminds historians that ancient Jerusalem was not only a city of walls and temples, but also a place where engineering and survival were bound together beneath the surface of daily life. Even today, much of the subterranean world of the City of David remains only partially explored, shielded by layers of later construction and modern life above. Archaeologists continue to study the tunnels and water systems, but significant portions remain inaccessible due to buildings and streets that now cover the ancient landscape. Each excavation reveals new corridors or unexpected connections that hint at a larger underground network still waiting to be understood. The deeper researchers look into the bedrock, the more it becomes clear that the ancient city extended downward as much as it expanded outward. And within those silent passages carved through Jerusalem's oldest hill, ancient water still moves through stone corridors that were never meant to be found. The lost city of Bethsaida. The waters of the northern Galilean plain hide a city whose streets and walls once echoed with daily life, now silenced under layers of silt and sediment. What remains of Bethsaida is scarcely visible to the modern eye, its ruins scattered and partially submerged in marshes and shallow bays. Even from the shore, the land appears ordinary, with reeds and grasses rippling in the wind, giving no hint of the urban settlement that once thrived here. Yet beneath the soil, fragments of walls, street lines and domestic structures tell a story of a city that was both humble and significant, its past woven into the biblical narrative and the human lives that passed through it. Bethsaida appears in the Gospels as the hometown of the apostles and the backdrop for miraculous healings, yet few physical traces remain to anchor these stories to the land. According to Scripture, it was the birthplace of Peter, Andrew and Philip, and it hosted events such as the healing of a blind man in the Gospel of John. For centuries, pilgrims and historians debated its precise location, as the written record existed without clear markers in the landscape. The city's biblical fame contrasts sharply with its archaeological obscurity, creating a tension between legend and evidence that continues to intrigue researchers and visitors alike. Seasonal floods and shifting lake levels have constantly reshaped the terrain, masking ancient foundations and leaving only faint hints of a city once thriving on the shore. Over centuries, sediments carried by the Jordan River and local streams built up along the shoreline, while changes in the water table occasionally submerged or revealed fragments of walls. During periods of drought, stone outlines emerge on dry patches, offering tantalizing glimpses of streets and houses, only to disappear again as the water rises. The lake itself has acted as both preserver and eraser, concealing Bethsaida's remains while protecting them from centuries of human interference. Fragments of stone pavements and broken pottery discovered in scattered locations reveal glimpses of domestic life, offering clues to the routines of fishermen, merchants and families. Roof tiles and small tools indicate construction techniques and household activities, while fish bones found nearby suggest a community that relied heavily on the lake for sustenance. Coins stamped with Roman and local imagery trace the flow of commerce, hinting at trade networks that connected Bethsaida with other towns along the Galilee. Each fragment, small and unassuming, provides a thread in the larger tapestry of a city whose full design has yet to be reconstructed. Scholars continue to debate whether the settlement known as Julias merged with Bethsaida, a question that complicates efforts to define the city's original borders and layout. Some evidence suggests that the Roman settlement was built atop or adjacent to the older town, while other clues indicate distinct construction styles and street patterns. This overlap leaves open the possibility that two cities separated by time or culture may occupy the same physical space, making the task of mapping Bethsaida like tracing the shadows of a vanished world. Modern research must weigh textual sources, topography, and archaeology to untangle this complex history. Rising and falling waters occasionally expose remnants of walls and streets, suggesting that parts of the city may now lie partially submerged, preserved in silence beneath the lake. Divers and sonar surveys have identified stone lines and rectangular formations that hint at urban organisation, yet these submerged sections remain largely unexplored. The shifting water acts as both protector and barrier. What is revealed is fragile and transient, and much of the city continues to lie hidden, inaccessible to excavation teams. The image of a city slowly sinking into the lake adds an almost spectral quality to Bethsaida, as if it exists half in memory, half in material reality. Artifacts recovered from the site point to everyday life. Fishing nets, cooking utensils, and coins indicate a small but thriving community whose inhabitants relied on both the lake and the fertile plains. Houses were simple but functional, constructed from locally quarried stone, while storage pits and hearths revealed domestic routines. The presence of imported goods, such as fine pottery or coins from distant regions, suggests that residents were connected to broader trade networks, even in a settlement that might otherwise seem isolated. Every recovered item provides a glimpse into how ordinary people lived, laboured, and adapted to their environment, tying daily existence to the city's larger story. Evidence of public areas and possible marketplaces hints at civic life, though centuries of sediment have concealed the precise arrangement of buildings and ceremonial spaces. Stone foundations indicate open courtyards or communal gathering areas, while fragments of larger structures suggest administrative or religious functions. Although much has been lost to time, these remnants imply that Bethsaida was not merely a lakeside village, but a city with social and economic organisation. The interplay between residential, commercial, and ritual spaces hints at a community balancing subsistence, faith, and interaction with the wider world. The miracles recounted in Scripture, feeding multitudes, restoring sight, and encounters with apostles, cast a shadow over the ruins, connecting the site to stories that remain partly veiled in mystery. For visitors and researchers, it is impossible to separate the physical remnants from the weight of history and legend. The very earth seems to hold traces of those events, though no definitive archaeological evidence can locate them precisely. This duality, the coexistence of myth and material, imbues Bethsaida with a sense of awe and unease, making the city both real and elusive, tangible yet forever just out of reach. Isolated fragments of streets and walls have been painstakingly documented, but the full extent of Bethsaida's urban fabric remains unknown, a puzzle only partially revealed. Mapping these fragments requires cross-referencing historical texts, topography, and artifacts, yet gaps remain that may never be filled. Modern settlements, agriculture, and shifting lake levels cover much of the original site, leaving archaeologists to work in sections, reconstructing the city in pieces. Each discovery sparks new questions. Were these streets aligned with the older settlement? How extensive was the community? What remains forever hidden under mud and water? Time has claimed the city's streets and dwellings, leaving traces that whisper of a community that once thrived along the lake's edge. A combination of sedimentation, rising waters, and human development has erased much of Bethsaida from view, yet the surviving remnants continue to speak. They tell of families who lived, worked, and prayed here, of apostles who may have walked these streets, and of a city that witnessed moments both ordinary and miraculous. Though partially lost, Bethsaida endures as a site of history, faith, and enduring mystery, where every artifact uncovered hints at untold stories. Under the shifting mud and quiet waters of the Galilean plains, the lost streets of Bethsaida may still conceal secrets that time has refused to reveal. The desert caves of Qumran. Cliffs of sun-baked stone rise sharply from the arid plain, concealing narrow caves that have sheltered secrets for over 2,000 years. The jagged rocks cast long shadows across the desert floor, a labyrinth of stone that seems to have been designed to hide rather than reveal. From afar, the terrain appears barren and unyielding, yet within these caves lies evidence of human life, meticulously preserved in the unforgiving climate. The site's isolation has long protected its secrets, allowing the desert to act as both guardian and barrier, keeping the manuscripts and traces of the community nearly impervious to time's relentless erosion. A shepherd tending his flock discovered clay jars tucked into a crevice, unintentionally revealing a cache of ancient scrolls that would reshape understanding of biblical texts. The jars, weathered and covered in dust, were carefully sealed, as though the inhabitants had anticipated centuries of waiting. When the shepherd's find reached local antiquities dealers, the world slowly became aware of the extraordinary nature of the caves. The scrolls themselves contained fragments of scripture and writings unknown to modern scholars, sparking both excitement and debate. Each manuscript, delicate and brittle, hinted at a world where faith, ritual and secrecy intersected in ways that remain partially obscure to this day. Archaeological evidence suggests a reclusive group inhabited the plateau above the Dead Sea, their daily rituals and spiritual practices preserved only through fragments of manuscripts and architectural remnants. Some researchers associate them with the Essenes, a sect mentioned briefly in historical texts, though their precise identity is uncertain. They appear to have lived apart from larger settlements, in simple stone structures arranged in an organised yet unobtrusive manner. Remnants of communal rooms, cisterns and pottery indicate a lifestyle devoted to study, ritual purity and seclusion, but much of their existence remains enigmatic, preserved only in faint traces of human activity in carefully written manuscripts. The caves themselves are jagged and austere, their tight passageways and hidden chambers offering protection from both harsh climate and human interference. Many are small enough that only one person could enter at a time, requiring careful manoeuvring along uneven stone floors. The labyrinthine formation of these chambers may have been intentional, designed to conceal the precious scrolls from outsiders while providing sufficient space for storage. The very shape of the rock shelters creates shadows and silence, making the caves feel suspended between past and present. Even today, standing at the entrance, one can sense a deliberate effort to maintain both secrecy and security in this forbidding environment. Within these rock-bound vaults lay manuscripts ranging from biblical texts to sectarian writings, each scroll offering insight into a community whose identity remains partially obscured. Some of the scrolls contained copies of books now in the Hebrew Bible, while others preserved commentaries, hymns, and legal instructions unique to the group. The diversity of the texts suggests a society deeply invested in both interpretation and preservation of knowledge, aware that their words might outlive them. Every fragment carries faint impressions of the scribe's hand, a reminder that these were human creations carefully curated, yet left deliberately to endure long after the writers themselves had vanished. Arid desert air, stable temperatures, and careful placement allowed fragile parchment and papyrus to endure centuries without disintegrating, a testament to both foresight and circumstance. The low humidity prevented mould and decay, while the cave's positioning on cliffs avoided seasonal floods that could have washed away the manuscripts. The careful folding and storage of scrolls in clay jars further protected the delicate materials, revealing an understanding of preservation far ahead of its time. Each scroll that survives is not only a document but a silent witness to the combination of natural forces and human diligence that allowed them to endure, carrying messages from a vanished community to the modern world. Mysteries persist about how many scrolls were originally stored here and whether additional manuscripts remain concealed in the labyrinthine cliffs, unseen by modern eyes. References within the texts imply a larger library than what has been recovered, and the uneven terrain suggests additional hiding spots that may never be fully explored. Some caves remain difficult to access, and political or environmental constraints have limited excavation efforts. These gaps in knowledge leave open the possibility that more of the sect's writings still lie waiting untouched and unread, potentially capable of shedding further light on the religious, cultural and social practices of the people who chose this harsh, isolated home. Teams catalogued artifacts and structural remains meticulously, revealing glimpses of daily life while raising further questions about the community's beliefs and organisation. Clay lamps, oil jars and fragments of textiles suggest routines of work, study and ritual observance. Architectural evidence hints at divisions between communal and private spaces, possibly reflecting hierarchies or functional needs within the sect. Yet for every object uncovered, questions multiply. Why these caves? Why this particular arrangement? And what drove the inhabitants to maintain such extreme seclusion? Each artifact carries echoes of choices made under desert sun and starlight, telling a story that remains tantalizingly incomplete. Isolation defined existence at Qumran, where scorching sun, jagged cliffs and scarce water made survival demanding, yet also preserved the scrolls from decay and intrusion. The community would have contended with extreme temperatures, windswept dust, and limited access to arable land, shaping both their daily routines and their dependence on the caves. This harsh environment, while unforgiving, provided an unintended protection, keeping the scrolls safe from human interference and natural degradation. The remoteness of the plateau emphasizes a deliberate choice to separate from the wider world, embedding the manuscripts in silence and solitude, as if the desert itself were a partner in guarding their secrets. The writings themselves offer faint echoes of a vanished religious and intellectual world, illuminating practices, interpretations, and rituals while leaving significant mysteries unresolved. They reveal commentaries on scripture, reflections on law, and hymns of devotion, hinting at a sophisticated theological worldview that cannot be fully reconstructed. At the same time, the texts raise more questions than they answer. The meaning of certain passages, the intent behind their preservation, and the full extent of the library remain unknown. Each scroll is a bridge across millennia, connecting contemporary readers with voices that remain at once intimate and unknowable. Careful study of the caves and their contents continues to uncover subtle patterns, suggesting a civilization both devout and fiercely secretive in its devotion and record-keeping. The arrangement of manuscripts, the choice of caves, and even the handwriting styles reveal a meticulous attention to detail and a commitment to preserving tradition under extreme conditions. Researchers continue to decipher these patterns, uncovering relationships between texts and inscriptions that hint at ritual cycles, theological emphasis, and the priorities of the group. Yet for all this analysis, the complete picture of Qumran's community remains elusive, a civilization forever suspended between revelation and obscurity. Perched on the cliffs above the Dead Sea, the caves of Qumran may still guard manuscripts that have never been read, waiting silently to reveal their forgotten truths. The Copper Scroll Treasure Locations. A sheet of hammered copper, etched with precise lettering, emerged from the arid cave walls, unlike any other manuscript ever found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. Its metallic sheen, surviving centuries in the desert's dry air, immediately distinguished it from fragile parchment and papyrus. The copper seemed to carry a weight not only of material but of intent, as if those who created it anticipated that their instructions would need to endure beyond lifetimes. Scholars who first examined the scroll were astonished. Instead of sacred text, this artifact offered a meticulous list of hidden wealth, hinting at both devotion and secrecy that spanned generations. Unlike delicate parchment or papyrus, this scroll contained not prayers or scripture but a list of treasures, gold, silver, and sacred vessels hidden across the hills of Judea. The unusual choice of medium suggested urgency and permanence, an attempt to preserve vital information in a form that would withstand the ravages of time. Its contents read almost like a map, though written in enigmatic descriptions and measurements that complicate modern understanding. Each line conveyed both promise and frustration, outlining riches that had inspired curiosity, speculation, and decades of fruitless searching. The very act of inscribing treasure locations on copper created an artifact that is simultaneously practical, symbolic, and profoundly mysterious. The Copper Scroll appears rooted in a time of upheaval, a period after Jerusalem fell to Roman forces when the temple's riches vanished into chaos. Historical context lends gravity to the document, suggesting that the wealth it describes may have been hidden hastily during an era when survival and preservation were paramount. Coins, gold vessels, and sacred implements, once held within the temple, could have been transported, dispersed, or deliberately concealed to avoid confiscation. The scroll preserves more than a list. It captures a moment of anxiety, calculation, and reverence, a silent record of a society grappling with conquest, displacement, and the need to protect both faith and fortune. Its instructions point toward valleys, secluded caves, and cisterns scattered across rugged terrain, locations that may have shielded treasure from human eyes for centuries. The scroll's descriptions are precise yet cryptic, using landmarks and measurements that are difficult to reconcile with the modern landscape. Deep ravines, overgrown gorges, and hidden depressions in the rocky hills would have offered ideal concealment. For those attempting to follow the directions today, the environment itself becomes a puzzle, blending natural obstacles with centuries of shifting geography, as if the land conspires to guard the secrets inscribed in copper. The scroll's durability was deliberate. Etched into metal, it resisted decay, allowing its coded message to endure long after those who hid the treasure had vanished. While parchment would have crumbled or decayed under the harsh desert sun and low humidity, the copper preserved the letters with astonishing clarity. Each groove and incision tells a story of careful planning and painstaking labor, evidence of a society aware that the information contained within needed to withstand both time and human interference. It is a testament to foresight and an understanding of permanence rarely seen in other artifacts of the period. Decoding its contents has confounded generations of historians, as ancient place names and cryptic measurements resist clear correlation with modern geography. Names of valleys, hills, and hidden cisterns appear in forms that may have changed, vanished, or been deliberately obfuscated. Attempts to match scroll references with maps of Judea produce conflicting theories, and small errors in measurement could lead seekers astray. The cryptic nature of the instructions creates a tension between faith in their authenticity and frustration at their opacity, a balance that sustains the scroll's enduring aura of mystery. Explorers and archaeologists in the 20th century scoured mountains and ravines, retracing the scroll's directions, yet repeatedly returned empty-handed, deepening the mystery. The pursuit became part archaeology, part legend, as teams combed hillsides and examined crevices, water cisterns, and hidden caves with meticulous care. Each empty chamber added both disappointment and fascination, emphasizing the cleverness of those who'd initially concealed the wealth. Even today, maps of potential locations are speculative, and modern technology has yet to solve the enigma, leaving treasure hunters and researchers alike both obsessed and unsettled. Some argue that the treasures were relocated or looted long ago, while others suggest the scroll may have served a symbolic or ceremonial purpose, leaving its literal intent unresolved. Perhaps the listings were not meant for actual recovery, or perhaps they were removed during political upheaval, hidden beyond reach. Scholars and treasure hunters speculate endlessly. Some see the scroll as a practical record, others as a relic of ritual significance, encoding spiritual or societal values rather than purely material wealth. The ambiguity itself reinforces the scroll's enigmatic status, a document straddling the line between historical record and unsolved riddle. The natural landscape itself forms a puzzle, with narrow canyons, hidden clefts, and water cisterns complicating every attempt to follow the scroll's coded path. Rocky ridges rise sharply against the sky, dropping into valleys that seem both familiar and unrecognizable over centuries of erosion and human activity. The terrain could have protected treasures for millennia, challenging anyone attempting to locate them. Even when modern surveyors identify promising areas, the complexity of the landscape and subtlety of the scroll's descriptions create layers of uncertainty, as if the land itself conspires to obscure the treasures it may guard. Through ongoing study, the Copper Scroll continues to inspire fascination, blurring the line between historical record and legend, while captivating those who seek its secrets. Every re-examination, every cross-reference with ancient texts and maps, seems to open new questions rather than provide definitive answers. The scroll's material presence, metallic, resilient, and precise, reminds researchers of its creator's intentions, while the enduring absence of the treasures maintains the suspense. It is an artifact that transcends time, bridging ancient intent with modern curiosity and inviting each generation to test its ingenuity against the coded instructions of the past. The enduring enigma of these lists challenges anyone who attempts to reconstruct the past, teasing both the imagination and the ambition of treasure seekers. Some pages of the scroll are missing or corroded, adding gaps to the narrative and deepening uncertainty. Measurements of distances, quantities, and landmarks require assumptions that may never be verifiable, creating endless debate and speculation. Each attempt to trace the treasures is both a journey through geography and a confrontation with history's oblique designs, forcing seekers to confront the limits of interpretation, patience, and understanding. Among the rocky hills and ancient valleys of Judea, the treasures inscribed on the Copper Scroll may remain undiscovered, awaiting the one who can finally decipher their hidden locations. The sealed tombs of the Valley of Hinnom. Voices of the past seem trapped within stone doors, their silence echoing a careful secrecy that has survived countless generations. The tombs themselves, carved with meticulous precision into rock, suggest a deliberate intent to both preserve and protect. Every incision and niche tells of a society deeply concerned with honouring the dead while guarding them from intrusion. Archaeologists who study these chambers note the care with which entrances were sealed, indicating that the closures were not accidental but a conscious measure of respect, ritual, and perhaps fear. Even the smallest cavities hint at stories now inaccessible, leaving the imagination to fill the void. Ancient texts recall Gehinnom as a place of warning and ritual, suggesting that some tombs were deliberately closed to protect both the living and the dead. References in biblical literature portray the valley as a site of moral caution, associated with fire, judgment, and purification, casting a shadow over its physical presence. This interplay between scripture and archaeology complicates the narrative, as the valley exists both in historical reality and in the imagination of generations. Each sealed tomb becomes more than a resting place. It is a symbol, a threshold between the known and the unknowable, its very inaccessibility reinforcing the aura of dread and reverence. Inside each chamber, the arrangement of ossuaries and carved niches reveals meticulous planning, hinting at social hierarchies and familial devotion etched into the rock. Certain niches are grouped according to age, sex, or lineage, while others are positioned in ways that suggest ritual importance. Scholars studying these arrangements note that the placement of bones and artifacts reflects both practical concerns, preservation and spatial efficiency, and deeply symbolic considerations such as proximity to ancestors or orientation to natural light. The physical order of the tombs becomes a silent testimony to beliefs about death, afterlife, and memory, conveying meaning that can only be partially interpreted today. Seals of plaster and massive stone slabs speak of deliberate concealment, as if those who closed the tombs intended their contents to remain untouched indefinitely. Many slabs bear no inscriptions, leaving no clues to the identities within, while others feature minimal carvings, abstract symbols, perhaps protective in nature. Archaeologists believe the sealing method served dual purposes: to preserve remains from environmental damage and to shield them from potential looters or rival groups. Each barrier seems designed to communicate both authority and mystery, ensuring that anyone who encounters a sealed tomb understands the weight of what lies behind it, even without opening the door. Artifacts discovered within, fragments of pottery, inscriptions, and skeletal remains, offer glimpses into beliefs surrounding death, ancestry, and ritual preservation. Ossuaries made of limestone and clay reveal detailed craftsmanship, and even broken vessels suggest ceremonial use. Small objects such as personal ornaments or tools accompany some burials, pointing to traditions of providing for the deceased beyond life. Inscriptions, sometimes faint or fragmented, include names, blessings, or cryptic phrases, emphasizing that these tombs were more than repositories. They were statements of faith, lineage, and societal structure, frozen in stone for those who might come after. Some passages within the tombs are almost inaccessible, their narrow shafts and hidden recesses forcing even experienced explorers to approach with caution. The engineering required to create these chambers is remarkable, reflecting both skill and a profound understanding of the rock's stability. Archaeologists note that certain tombs may have been intended for very few visitors, if any, making modern exploration a delicate balance of patience and precision. The difficulty of access itself becomes a narrative device, enforcing the idea that some secrets were never meant to be revealed casually, and that the tomb's silence is as deliberate as the inscriptions on their walls. Inscriptions, often fragmentary, contain symbolic warnings or protective invocations, leaving much of their meaning tantalizingly out of reach yet unmistakably purposeful. Some carvings invoke divine protection over the deceased, while others seem to serve as admonitions against disturbing the dead. The language is sparse, occasionally ritualistic, and always evocative, inviting interpretations that range from spiritual to practical. Each mark reinforces the notion that these tombs were not merely functional spaces but deeply meaningful constructs, where words, symbols, and structure intertwine to communicate across generations. Over time, the valley's tombs became entwined with legend, inspiring stories of fire, judgment, and unseen forces guarding the dead. Later texts and oral traditions amplified the valley's fearsome reputation, describing it as a liminal space between life and the afterlife. Travelers and chroniclers wrote of ominous echoes, strange winds, and the inexplicable preservation of certain tombs, creating an atmosphere that blends reality with myth. These stories, while not verifiable in the scientific sense, have shaped perceptions of the valley for millennia, enhancing its mystique and reinforcing the sense that the sealed tombs are more than archaeological relics. They are guardians of memory and moral warning, Several sealed chambers remain untouched, their contents unknown, and every unopened door raises questions about the intentions of those who constructed them. The presence of these untouched tombs creates tension between curiosity and reverence, as modern explorers weigh the value of discovery against the potential loss of historical context. The very fact that they remain closed emphasizes a deliberate choice made in the past. Some knowledge was meant to be preserved, but never revealed. Each sealed door becomes a symbol of the unknown, a tangible boundary between the living and the dead, the seen and the unseen. Interweaving burial practice, religious belief, and historical events, the valley preserves a continuum of mystery that defies simple interpretation. Scholars draw connections between the placement of tombs, biblical references, and ritual traditions, yet no single theory fully explains every detail. Some chambers may reflect social hierarchies, others ritual purity, and still others a deliberate effort to invoke awe or fear. The valley functions simultaneously as an archaeological site, a historical record, and a cultural symbol, challenging anyone who seeks to interpret it to consider multiple dimensions of time, belief, and human intention. Even with careful study and documentation, the sealed tombs resist full understanding, blending historical fact, ritual symbolism, and legend into a single enduring puzzle. Each new finding raises more questions than it answers, and the interplay of evidence and imagination sustains the valley's mysterious reputation. The tombs are at once tangible and elusive, revealing glimpses of past practices while guarding secrets that may never be fully uncovered. Researchers continue to debate their significance, knowing that each chamber holds traces of a civilization that meticulously balanced the known with the unknowable. Within the silent stone chambers of the Valley of Hinnom, the tombs may guard secrets that not even centuries of human curiosity have dared to uncover. The hidden oasis of En-Gedi. Whispers of survival and secrecy linger in En-Gedi, a place where water and life defy the harshness of the surrounding desert. The oasis, fed by hidden springs that emerge from jagged cliffs, offers a startling contrast to the surrounding arid landscape. Streams trickle into shaded pools where reeds and palm trees flourish, creating microhabitats that have supported life for millennia. Travelers and explorers over the centuries have remarked on the almost otherworldly nature of the oasis, a verdant secret tucked amid seemingly uninhabitable terrain. Its very existence suggests both divine providence and a natural safeguard for those who once relied upon its hidden waters. Stories in the Hebrew Bible recount how David sought refuge here, intertwining the oasis with narratives of concealment, divine protection, and human resilience. The accounts place En-Gedi not merely as a backdrop, but as an active participant in survival, where geography and faith meet. These biblical narratives frame the oasis as a haven, its hidden springs and secluded grottos allowing fugitives to evade pursuers. Over time, the site became synonymous with escape, endurance, and secrecy, transforming a physical refuge into a symbol of divine shelter and human perseverance, leaving behind a legacy that continues to draw attention from historians and mystics alike. The life that flourishes around its springs, ibex, gazelles, and rare vegetation, reveals an ecosystem shaped by isolation and hidden abundance. Some species are found only within the oasis, their survival dependent on the consistent flow of fresh water and the protective cover of cliffs. These animals move quietly, often unseen, reinforcing the sense of the oasis as a space apart from the rest of the desert. Plant life thrives in layered canopies, from towering palms to delicate herbs, creating pockets of shade and shelter. This concentration of flora and fauna suggests a fragile balance, where the natural and the hidden intertwine, preserving secrets of adaptation and survival that have remained largely untouched by human interference. Ancient grottos and narrow passages suggest that human hands adapted natural spaces for protection, ritual, or storage, leaving subtle traces that challenge modern understanding. Carved niches and small chambers are scattered along the cliffs, some obscured by vegetation or stone overhangs, hinting at deliberate concealment. These spaces may have been used for temporary refuge, sacred ceremonies, or even the storage of food and water, but their true purpose remains speculative. The ingenuity required to adapt the raw terrain into functional spaces demonstrates a nuanced understanding of both the environment and social needs, suggesting that the oasis offered more than sustenance. It provided a controlled sanctuary in a hostile region. Fragments of terraces, walls, and inscriptions hint at centuries of occupation, offering glimpses of the daily lives and beliefs of those who once lived here. The terraces, though eroded and incomplete, indicate agricultural practices that maximize limited arable land. Walls of stone and mud suggest structures built for defense or communal use, while faint inscriptions mark ritual or commemorative activity. Even partial evidence creates a vivid portrait of life within the oasis, revealing how humans manipulated water and terrain to sustain themselves. Yet much of this history remains elusive, leaving scholars and visitors alike to wonder what deeper stories might be concealed in hidden corners, waiting for discovery. The springs themselves, sources of sustenance, may have guided settlement patterns, with concealed pools serving both practical and strategic purposes for past inhabitants. Some pools are accessible only by narrow passages, their existence known to few, suggesting that knowledge of water was tightly controlled. Freshwater availability dictated movement, habitation, and possibly even social hierarchy, giving certain groups access to life-sustaining resources while others were excluded. The very location of these springs, protected by natural barriers, implies that survival depended on both secrecy and intimate knowledge of the land. These waters, quietly flowing for millennia, remain at the heart of the oasis's enduring mystery and attraction. Local legends speak of secret hideaways, hidden chambers, and artifacts long forgotten, merging myth and reality to create an enduring sense of mystery. Stories passed down through generations describe concealed dwellings and sacred spots within the oasis, some connected to ancient kings, prophets, or fugitives. The blending of folklore and tangible evidence adds layers of suspense, as every unexplored corner seems capable of revealing a relic or story lost to time. Visitors often report an uncanny sense of the unseen, as if the oasis itself guards its history, allowing only glimpses and fragments to reach those who venture into its shaded depths. Engedi's role as a sanctuary extended beyond survival, providing a vantage for observation and protection, and perhaps a sacred space for ritual practice. Its hidden pools and grottos offered both refuge and strategic advantage, while open terraces allowed oversight of approaching paths. The spatial organisation suggests intentional design, balancing accessibility with concealment. Religious or ceremonial activity may have been interwoven with practical habitation, creating spaces that were simultaneously sacred, defensive, and utilitarian. Such dual-purpose use reinforces the sense that the oasis was more than a shelter. It was a living symbol of resilience, cunning, and the interface between human intent and natural design. Sections of the oasis remain untouched, preserving enigmas that hint at lost objects, inscriptions, or evidence of practices now unknown. Narrow caverns, overgrown terraces, and hidden alcoves defy exploration, leaving scholars to speculate about what may lie within. These areas are shielded from both natural erosion and human disturbance, creating pockets where centuries of history could remain intact. The inaccessibility reinforces the aura of secrecy that surrounds Engedi, allowing the imagination to flourish as much as the historical record. Each unexamined space becomes a canvas for curiosity, where both science and speculation meet in a delicate balance. Over centuries, human presence has interwoven with the oasis's natural rhythms, creating layers of history, ritual, and ecological adaptation that remain only partially visible. Patterns of water management, plant cultivation, and temporary habitation reflect sophisticated responses to environmental challenges. Seasonal variation, flood events, and animal migration shaped how humans and wildlife interacted, leaving subtle clues in the soil, stone, and remaining artifacts. These overlapping layers blur the line between natural and human-engineered systems, suggesting a dialogue between people and landscape that continues to unfold through study and exploration. Many corners of Engedi retain their secrets, offering tantalizing hints of lives, rituals, and stories that have escaped documentation. Small alcoves, half-hidden terraces, and isolated pools remain almost entirely untouched, preserving traces of activities and practices lost to time. Each discovery often leads to more questions than answers, as the oasis reveals its history in fragments and glimpses. The combination of secrecy, abundance, and survival ensures that the oasis remains both a historical site and a source of wonder, where past and present converge in a living, breathing landscape that has yet to surrender all its mysteries. Within the quiet currents of Engedi's hidden waters, ancient truths may persist. quietly defying discovery and the passage of time. The forgotten fortress of Machaerus. Rising abruptly from the barren hills of modern-day Jordan, Machaerus casts a foreboding silhouette. Its stone walls are silent witness to centuries of history and bloodshed. The fortress perches atop a rugged plateau, its sheer cliffs separating it from the surrounding plains and giving it an air of both isolation and command. From afar, the ruins appear desolate, yet every fractured wall and collapsed tower hints at lives once lived, battles fought, and secrets kept within its confines. Travellers and historians alike have long remarked on the imposing geometry of its terraces and fortifications, which seem both deliberate and designed to intimidate. Even in ruin, the fortress projects a presence that dominates the horizon. Texts from antiquity recount Machaerus as the place where John the Baptist was imprisoned, linking its stones to events that reverberate through scripture and historical memory. Josephus, the 1st century Romano-Jewish historian, described its strategic importance and associated it with Roman governance, situating the fortress at a crossroads of politics and biblical narrative. The accounts suggest that the fortress's isolation was deliberate, ensuring that key figures could be confined securely while nearby settlements remained under observation. The combination of political intrigue and sacred history imbues the site with a tension that persists even today, drawing scholars and pilgrims to its ruined terraces. Constructed with careful precision, its walls, terraces and towers reveal the ingenuity of Roman military architecture, while hinting at spaces now lost to ruin and neglect. Masonry work carved into natural stone allowed defenders to create strongholds that exploited the plateau's elevation. Towers projected at strategic angles, enabling both offense and surveillance, while inner terraces provided living space, storage and refuge. Even today, weathered stairways and remnants of fortifications demonstrate advanced engineering, suggesting that every corner of Machaerus was planned for both functionality and defense. Yet, centuries of erosion and seismic activity have erased portions of its original design, leaving only hints of the fortress's full scope. Weathered staircases, cisterns and defensive bulwarks suggest human ingenuity, yet their hidden depths continue to guard secrets waiting to be uncovered. Some stairways lead to collapsed chambers, while cisterns carved deep into rock still hold traces of rainwater, hinting at the measures taken to sustain life in isolation. Defensive walls, though partially crumbled, indicate layers of fortification meant to repel attackers or restrict access. Scholars speculate that additional underground chambers, now inaccessible, may once have stored weapons, provisions, or perhaps even items tied to its historical prisoners. Each discovery opens new avenues of inquiry while reinforcing the fortress's aura of concealed purpose. Certain chambers are thought to have held prisoners, but the exact locations of confinement and execution remain uncertain, leaving only shadowed spaces and conjecture. Historical sources describe John the Baptist's captivity, yet no definitive archaeological evidence pinpoints the precise rooms where he or others may have been held. Small cells, partially excavated, could represent these spaces, but erosion and later human activity have altered their interiors beyond recognition. The uncertainty amplifies the fortress's mystique. As visitors wander among stairs and niches that may have witnessed pivotal moments, their imagination filling in gaps left by time and decay. Water systems, carved cisterns and aqueducts demonstrate the strategic foresight required to sustain life atop the fortress, while their concealed depths harbour stories yet untold. Rainwater collection and distribution allowed inhabitants to remain self-sufficient, a necessity in a location isolated from nearby settlements. Some cisterns are accessible only by narrow, winding shafts, suggesting that their placement was deliberate and knowledge of their locations was restricted. The flow of water through these systems not only ensured survival, but also created hidden spaces where supplies and perhaps other objects could be stored out of sight. These functional features now take on a mysterious aspect, as their original purposes are partially veiled by time. Accounts of secret passages, lost caches, and unexplored chambers circulate among historians and guides, transforming the fortress from a historical site into a puzzle of enduring intrigue. While physical evidence for these passages remains sparse, mentions in ancient sources and the layout of surviving walls suggest that concealed corridors may have existed. Some scholars propose that escape routes or smuggling passages could have connected the fortress to nearby valleys, providing both strategic flexibility and a sense of peril for those inside. These theories, though unproven, amplify the narrative tension surrounding Machaerus, making the ruins more than a relic. They are a labyrinth of potential discovery. The fortress's elevated position granted control over surrounding territories, making it both a strategic stronghold and a secluded vantage point that hid critical events from the world below. From its terraces, observers could monitor caravan routes, nearby settlements, and potential threats, maintaining both surveillance and defense. The fortress's height offered an advantage against sieges, while its isolation meant that news or visitors had to traverse difficult terrain before reaching its gates. This combination of dominance and seclusion reinforces the notion that Machaerus was designed not only for containment but for discretion, allowing political prisoners, treasures, and sensitive operations to remain out of sight. Modern surveys and excavations reveal only partial traces of its former complexity, with many corridors and rooms remaining inaccessible, leaving unanswered questions for all who seek its history. Archaeologists have mapped terraces, staircases, and walls, yet large sections remain buried or destroyed. Some chambers have yielded pottery shards, Roman coins, and other artifacts, but much remains hidden beneath rubble or cliff faces. Each excavation uncovers fragments of life and architecture, yet these fragments are tantalizingly incomplete, allowing imagination and speculation to fill gaps where concrete evidence is lacking. The fortress continues to guard its mysteries, revealing just enough to intrigue without fully explaining. Erosion and collapsing walls have altered its appearance over centuries, blending human craftsmanship with natural decay and creating a landscape that teeters between ruin and revelation. Weather and seismic activity have worn stone surfaces smooth, toppled towers, and shifted walls, transforming a once imposing structure into a ruin that hints at grandeur only through suggestion. The irregular terrain, combined with remnants of walls and terraces, creates natural barriers that obscure full sightlines, reinforcing the sense that the fortress is both revealed and concealed at once. Observers today can traverse portions of the site, but the majority of its original spatial complexity remains hidden, offering fleeting glimpses of past power. Silent walls and shadowed archways evoke an atmosphere of tension and secrecy, where each hidden corner seems to guard the fortress's long-forgotten past. Even in daylight, the angles of remaining towers and arches cast deep shadows that invite curiosity and caution. Staircases cut into rock, partially intact, lead to narrow chambers where the full function is unclear, while platforms and terraces suggest overlooked vantage points. The interplay of stone, shadow, and elevation creates an environment that feels simultaneously open and confining, revealing the fortress as a place where history, human intent, and natural topography converge in a persistent sense of mystery. Among the crumbling walls and silent corridors of Machaerus, shadows of the past linger, as if the fortress itself guards the stories it was built to conceal. The mysterious ruins of Ai. Historical sources portray Ai as a city whose sudden fall has confounded generations, leaving scholars to weigh scripture against the ruin's silent testimony. The hilltop settlement, once a centre of human activity in the heart of Ephraim, now exists mostly in fragments, its stones scattered and walls partially collapsed. Excavations over the past century have revealed tantalizing glimpses of the city's past, yet the full picture remains elusive. Ancient accounts describe a city conquered swiftly by Joshua and the Israelites, but the archaeological record offers only hints: foundations, broken pottery, and subtle traces of streets. Every corner of Ai seems to echo a story that has resisted full comprehension. Joshua's narrative depicts Ai's conquest in vivid detail, yet every discovery seems to reveal only fragments of a story that refuses to fully align. The biblical account portrays a swift and dramatic overthrow, with the city's inhabitants struck down and the walls set aflame. Modern excavations, however, suggest a far more complex reality, where layers of occupation, destruction, and rebuilding complicate the narrative. Scholars have noted that the archaeological strata contain traces of habitation that precede and follow the biblical event, raising questions about chronology and scale. Ai, in this sense, becomes a city caught between myth and material record, an enigma that continues to fascinate historians and archaeologists alike. Careful study of remaining walls and terraces shows intentional urban design, though the original layout remains elusive and open to interpretation. Sections of the ruins indicate fortified enclosures and defensive strategies, with stonework laid in patterns that suggest both practicality and planning. Yet entire stretches of walls are missing, likely removed or eroded over centuries, leaving large gaps in the city's blueprint. Stairways, terraces, and narrow alleys hint at how the inhabitants may have navigated the city, but the exact flow of life remains speculative. Each structural remnant seems to invite questions rather than provide answers, hinting at the sophistication of a settlement whose details have mostly faded from view. Pottery shards, tools, and traces of dwelling structures hint at a once thriving community, yet the population's scale and daily life remains speculative. Small fragments of ceramics reveal patterns of trade and domestic life, while the remnants of hearths suggest cooking practices and household arrangements. Stone tools, though simple, indicate skilled labour and an economy supported by craft and agriculture. Combined, these artefacts form a mosaic of daily existence that evokes human presence without fully revealing its contours. The people of Ai remain shadowy figures, their routines and struggles partially discernible through what they left behind, yet permanently obscured in the gaps of time. Scholars continue to question whether the biblical account corresponds with the archaeological footprint, leaving Ai's history suspended between legend and material remnants. Interpretations vary widely. Some argue that the city described in scripture may have been smaller than once thought, while others posit that Ai's prominence in the biblical narrative may have been symbolic. The lack of continuous inscriptions or extensive urban remains intensifies the uncertainty. Excavation findings suggest a settlement capable of sustaining a community, but not necessarily one matching the dramatic scale implied in ancient texts. This tension between narrative and ruin underscores Ai's enduring mystery, a city that refuses to fully submit its secrets. Signs of destruction, including collapsed stonework and layers of burned debris, suggest violent events, yet their precise cause remains uncertain. Some archaeologists have interpreted these layers as evidence of military conflict, perhaps consistent with the biblical account, while others argue for accidental fires or natural collapse. Burn marks, crumbled walls, and displaced masonry hint at chaos, but without definitive records, no single explanation suffices. Even when examining the ruins closely, observers are struck by the ambiguity. Ai's destruction is tangible yet mysterious, a tangible ruin that resists narrative closure and invites endless speculation. Structural analysis reveals defensive strategies that indicate strategic planning, yet missing sections of walls leave gaps in understanding the fortress's full capabilities. Bastions, elevated platforms, and partially preserved gates point to careful consideration of security, suggesting that Ai's inhabitants were prepared for both internal and external threats. Terraces and narrow passages imply a city designed for defense as much as habitation. Still, with significant portions lost to erosion, time, and human activity, reconstructing the city's full defensive logic is impossible. The ruins whisper of planning and forethought, yet their full story is obscured behind centuries of decay. Traces of irrigation and terracing imply a sophisticated relationship with the surrounding terrain, though much of this remains obscured by erosion and time. Channels for water management, remnants of agricultural terraces, and strategically placed cisterns reveal attempts to harness the environment for survival. These features suggest that Ai was not merely a passive settlement, but an active participant in shaping its surroundings. Yet centuries of wind, rain, and neglect have washed away much of this ingenuity, leaving only tantalizing hints. The interaction between city and landscape remains partially visible, a faint imprint of human adaptation that heightens the ruins' enigmatic allure. Patterns in building alignment and wall thickness hint at social organization, yet written records to clarify these patterns are absent. Larger, more robust structures may have housed administrators or elites, while simpler buildings suggest ordinary dwellings. Streets and terraces imply communal planning and functional zoning. Despite these clues, the absence of inscriptions, records, or definitive documentation leaves the social structure of Ai open to interpretation. Each visible remnant points to order and hierarchy, yet the city's human dimension, the thoughts, routines, and decisions of its inhabitants, remains forever elusive. Even minor discoveries such as worn stone paths or remnants of hearths evoke a sense of lives once lived amid the ruins, quietly preserving stories now mostly lost. Every footprint of activity, every fragment carries a silent weight, a testimony to daily existence in a city that has long ceased to function. These small traces transform Ai from a collection of stones into a human space, a settlement that was home to people whose struggles and joys are only faintly perceptible. It is in these understated remnants that the ruins retain their power, offering glimpses of life without ever fully revealing it. Each investigation into Ai peels back only a layer of mystery, leaving the city as much a puzzle as it was for the first explorers who walked its stones. New techniques, including aerial surveys and digital reconstructions, provide insights but also raise more questions. Every discovery opens new avenues of speculation, keeping the city suspended between the known and the unknowable. Ai resists closure, maintaining a quiet tension that invites scholars, historians, and the curious alike to continue probing its secrets. Time has preserved the city in a state of unresolved enigma, a challenge that endures through every excavation season. Ai lingers as a muted testament to a vanished world, where every remaining wall seems to challenge us to uncover what history refuses to reveal. The hidden fortress of Herodium. Ambition shaped every stone of Herodium, a fortress conceived to project power while concealing secrets that few could uncover. Perched on a man-made conical hill rising from the Judean desert, the structure was commissioned by Herod the Great, reflecting both his desire for military security and his obsession with monumental architecture. Unlike other fortresses, Herodium combined palatial luxury with strategic defense, a hybrid that left observers both awed and uneasy. Archaeological layers suggest that each wall, stairway and terrace was deliberately constructed to impress, intimidate, and endure through time, hinting at a calculated mind behind its design. The fortress's very shape, rising above the barren landscape, creates an illusion of invulnerability while masking hidden chambers within. Scholars today continue to debate the reasoning behind its exact location, balancing accessibility with seclusion. Records from Herod's reign hint at the political and personal motivations behind the fortress, intertwining strategy with displays of authority. Historical accounts suggest Herodium served multiple functions: a summer palace, a defensive stronghold, and ultimately a mausoleum. Herod's reputation for grandeur and ruthless efficiency is woven into every decision that shaped the site, from the height of its walls to the positioning of its gates. The construction required thousands of labourers over decades, an effort that left marks still visible in the quarried stone terraces and stepped foundations. This duality of purpose, comfort and control renders the fortress both a marvel of engineering and a testament to ambition, revealing a leader who understood power not only in battle but in the permanence of stone. Architectural studies reveal meticulous planning in walls, terraces and stairways, indicating both defensive ingenuity and ceremonial design. The fortress's layout reflects careful consideration of approach routes, visibility and sightlines, ensuring that both visitors and intruders would be observed. Each tower and wall segment appears to serve multiple purposes, functioning as a watchpoint, barrier and statement of authority simultaneously. Archaeologists have noted the alignment of terraces with natural contours of the hill, demonstrating an intimate understanding of landscape manipulation. The integration of geometric precision with organic slopes gives Herodium a distinctive profile, one that is both commanding and enigmatic. Its careful construction suggests not only military strategy but also an intent to impress anyone who approached with the reach of Herod's influence. Remnants of grand chambers and intricate water channels suggest the palace within was as much a symbol of luxury as a functional residence. Excavations have uncovered cisterns, paved courtyards, and carved stone rooms that would have accommodated royal life amidst the fortress's defensive elements. Sophisticated water management systems allowed the palace to flourish in the arid climate, supporting gardens, fountains, and domestic use while ensuring survival during sieges. Decorative elements, though partially eroded, hint at opulence. Traces of stucco, carved reliefs, and mosaics point to a carefully curated aesthetic. These surviving details illustrate the paradox of Herodium, an ostensibly military structure designed to awe and protect while sustaining the comfort and prestige of its royal inhabitant. Towers rising from the slopes demonstrate the dual purpose of vigilance and intimidation, designed to control both the desert and those within its gates. Each elevation provided overlapping lines of sight, allowing sentries to monitor approaches from miles away. Defensive features such as crenellated parapets and fortified gates emphasize readiness for conflict, yet the same towers may have served ceremonial or symbolic purposes, projecting Herod's authority across the region. Their placement exploits the hill's conical shape, maximizing both visibility and the psychological impression of dominance. Scholars have suggested that the positioning of these structures was carefully orchestrated to inspire loyalty among inhabitants while instilling unease in outsiders, blending practicality with spectacle. Artifacts, including carved stonework and traces of decorative mosaics, illuminate daily life while preserving the fortress's aura of secrecy. Pottery shards, tools, and inscriptions provide insight into the people who worked and lived within its walls. Items associated with domestic life contrast sharply with military implements, reinforcing the duality of Herodium as both palace and fortress. Some finds indicate temporary barracks for soldiers, while others reveal spaces intended for leisure and ceremony, including large halls with evidence of gatherings and feasts. Every object recovered serves as a clue, hinting at routines, social hierarchies, and the complex operations that kept the fortress functioning in a harsh and unforgiving environment. The burial site attributed to Herod himself remains only partially accessible, drawing intrigue and debate over its original placement and significance. Discovered in the 20th century, the tomb appears to have been deliberately concealed within the palace's upper terraces, a choice blending security with symbolic prominence. The remains and sarcophagus fragments suggest a richly adorned resting place, yet looting, erosion, and the passage of time have obscured full understanding. Scholars continue to investigate its alignment, construction, and the materials used, considering whether additional chambers remain undiscovered. The tomb reinforces the fortress's narrative as a space of power, secrecy, and mortality, linking Herod's life directly with the structure he built. Ingenious engineering allowed cisterns and reservoirs to sustain the fortress in an arid climate, yet some features remain hidden beneath collapsed structures. Excavations have revealed channels carved into rock and waterproofed reservoirs that collected seasonal rainfall, demonstrating a practical mastery of resource management. These systems were crucial for survival during prolonged sieges or droughts, yet the full extent of Herodium's water engineering may never be fully known. Some conduits remain buried or blocked by debris, hinting at undiscovered networks that could reveal additional aspects of the fortress's operation. This blend of visible and concealed engineering reinforces the sense that Herodium was a carefully orchestrated blend of practicality and secrecy. Monumental walls, strategic gates, and fortified platforms reflect a careful balance between utility, symbolism, and psychological influence. The walls' thickness and slope were designed for defense, while their ornamentation and scale conveyed power and grandeur. Gateways were positioned to control movement and impress visitors, serving as both functional barriers and statements of authority. Scholars have suggested that the combination of defensive precision and aesthetic consideration demonstrates Herod's desire to integrate military necessity with personal legacy. Every architectural choice seems deliberate, reinforcing the fortress's dual identity and maintaining the sense of mystery that has persisted for centuries. Portions of the complex remain unexplored or damaged, leaving unanswered questions about ceremonial functions, storage, and defensive priorities. Erosion, earthquakes, and the passage of time have obscured or destroyed sections of the palace and fortifications. Certain terraces and chambers remain inaccessible, hinting at lost corridors, rooms, or even treasure caches. Archaeologists continue to map and study the site, but each discovery often raises further questions rather than providing definitive answers. The unfinished or hidden elements of Herodium preserve its enigmatic reputation, a fortress whose secrets are as compelling as its surviving stone. Even today, scholars and visitors alike are confronted with the fortress's silent testimony to ambition, secrecy, and enduring enigma. Walking among the ruins, one senses a calculated tension between openness and concealment, luxury and defense, mortality and legacy. The surviving structures convey not only Herod's power, but also the uncertainty and intrigue that surrounded life in such a formidable, multi-purpose site. Visitors cannot help but imagine the countless lives shaped, commanded, and constrained within these walls, aware that the fortress still guards stories the centuries have not yet revealed. Herodium still whispers its mysteries to those who approach, as though daring anyone to uncover the truths long buried within its walls. The Desert Fortress of Arad. Power and vigilance converge in the Desert Fortress of Arad, a stronghold whose stones still guard untold stories of strategy, survival and secrecy. Rising above the southern Judean desert, this fortress was designed not merely to withstand attacks but to assert a quiet dominance over a harsh and unforgiving landscape. Its very location speaks to the blend of practicality and concealment, accessible enough to supply and defend, yet remote enough to deter intruders and preserve the operations within. Archaeologists note the careful alignment of terraces and walls with natural ridges, a design that conveys both authority and subtlety, leaving visitors with a sense that every stone was placed with intention. Records suggest it functioned as a critical outpost, monitoring desert approaches and protecting trade routes from unexpected threats. Scholars date its construction to the First Temple period, though subsequent expansions and modifications occurred under different rulers across centuries, reflecting the site's enduring strategic importance. The fortress likely served as both watchtower and refuge, a sentinel overseeing the movement of goods, people and armies alike. Its history is stitched with brief mentions in biblical and historical texts, yet the majority of its story remains silent, encoded in walls, gates and terraces that have weathered countless seasons of wind and sand. Layers of walls, terraces and bastions hint at both calculated defence and the silent assertion of authority across the arid landscape. Each fortified wall presents a challenge to intruders, while subtly demonstrating the command of those who built it. The fortress's gates, positioned to regulate approach and retreat, suggest a sophisticated understanding of both terrain and human psychology. Towers rise in measured intervals, providing overlapping lines of sight that allow defenders to detect movement miles away. The architecture itself seems designed to inspire unease in strangers while instilling confidence in occupants, a deliberate fusion of strategy, spectacle and secrecy that continues to intrigue scholars today. Ingenious systems of cisterns and wells reveal how occupants managed to survive in a climate that tested every human endeavour. Rainwater was carefully channeled into stone reservoirs, allowing the fortress to endure long dry seasons. Archaeologists have uncovered carved channels and waterproofed cisterns that sustained soldiers and administrators while supporting minimal vegetation within the walls. These practical innovations reflect a deep understanding of desert survival, combining resourcefulness with foresight. Some channels remain partially buried, suggesting there may be more undiscovered waterworks yet to be revealed, emphasizing the fortress's intricate balance of visible and concealed design. Elevated platforms and fortified gates once hosted soldiers whose daily routines blended discipline with constant readiness for conflict. Evidence of armaments such as arrow slits and weapon caches indicates the fortress was not merely symbolic but actively prepared for attack. Barracks and storage rooms suggest a small but organised garrison maintained the site, balancing daily life with continuous vigilance. Historical records imply that the fortress could serve as both a forward observation point and a safe retreat during regional skirmishes, reflecting its flexibility as a military installation. The placement of structures on terraces enhances both defence and surveillance, revealing a nuanced understanding of desert warfare. Several chambers remain unexcavated or obscured by collapsed stone, leaving historians to speculate about their original purpose. Narrow passageways, partially blocked staircases and vaulted rooms hint at administrative, ceremonial, or storage functions, but certainty remains elusive. Some spaces could have been temporary holding areas, hidden refuges, or places of ritual significance. The lack of definitive records amplifies the fortress's mysterious aura, and each new archaeological probe uncovers only fragments, prompting more questions than answers. This uncertainty reinforces the impression that Arad was designed with layers of both function and concealment, preserving secrets that continue to evade discovery. Fragments of pottery, inscriptions and tools offer glimpses into a community of warriors, administrators and labourers whose lives intersected within the walls. Simple ceramic vessels, carved stone tools and occasionally inscribed tablets provide context for daily routines and governance. These artefacts suggest that, despite its isolation, the fortress supported a functioning society, complete with supply chains, structured duties and communication networks. Every shard and inscription functions as a subtle testimony, illuminating lives once constrained by stone walls and desert winds, and hinting at social hierarchies and routines that remain partially obscured by time. Strategic placement above surrounding terrain allowed Arad to play a subtle yet pivotal role in regional defences and skirmishes. Its visibility across the desert floor made it both a deterrent and a communication point for Allied forces. Observers could spot approaching caravans or hostile parties days in advance, allowing the fortress to serve as both early warning and command centre. Ancient roads and paths suggest the fortress was connected to other settlements and military installations, forming a network of oversight and control that shaped political and economic interactions in the region. The precise siting of Arad demonstrates a blend of military pragmatism and psychological influence. Natural ridges and desert winds concealed its presence, allowing the fortress to observe without being easily observed itself. From certain angles, the stone walls blend with the surrounding cliffs and crags, making the structure appear as an extension of the terrain. Heat haze and dust further obscure lines of sight, which may have been exploited by inhabitants to monitor movement discreetly. This camouflage, combined with deliberate architectural choices, reinforces the fortress's enigmatic reputation. Visitors today can sense the subtle tension between exposure and concealment, a dynamic that underscores the careful balance between survival, strategy, and secrecy that defines Arad. Modern excavations struggle against erosion, partial collapse, and the shifting sands that continuously reclaim portions of the site. Archaeologists working at Arad contend with both natural and human-induced challenges, from windswept terraces to looted or disturbed chambers. Despite these obstacles, careful mapping, 3D modelling and stratigraphic study reveal complex layouts, water management systems, and defensive structures. Each season brings new insights, yet always leaves more questions. The interplay between exposed ruins and buried features ensures that the fortress retains an air of mystery, preserving the sense that many of its secrets remain locked beneath the desert's shifting surface. Visitors today encounter a silent sentinel, a fortress whose stones seem to challenge anyone who seeks to unravel its full story. Walking through the terraces, observing towers and tracing walls, one cannot ignore the pervasive sense of control and discretion embedded in every construction choice. Even in its ruined state, Arad conveys an impression of purposeful design, blending military efficiency, environmental mastery, and human ingenuity. The fortress stands as a witness to centuries of desert winds, human ambition, and the enduring enigma of structures built to endure yet obscure, reminding us that some histories are only partially revealed to the present. The desert fortress of Arad holds its secrets as tightly as the sands that surround it, daring anyone to uncover the stories buried beneath stone and silence. The enigmatic ruins of Teldan, the stones of Teldan, rise in quiet testimony to a city that once bridged empires, its walls and gates now fractured yet still stubbornly resisting the erosion of time. Nestled near the northern boundaries of ancient Israel, this settlement commanded both strategic and spiritual significance, occupying a crossroads where armies, merchants and pilgrims would have passed, leaving their fleeting marks upon a city whose full story remains partially veiled. Each shattered wall and weathered stone hints at human ambition and divine observance, yet these remnants conceal more than they reveal, leaving a palpable sense of unease for those who wander its ruins. Historical texts recount Teldan's contested role between the kingdoms of Israel and Aram, yet archaeology offers only fragments of confirmation. Its position on fertile lands and near water sources made it a valuable asset, coveted and fortified over generations. References in the Hebrew Bible and Assyrian annals describe the city as both a prize and a threat, a liminal space where borders blurred and allegiances shifted. The city's history appears as a tapestry of conquest and negotiation, and every layer of ruin holds the potential to rewrite what is known about this northern frontier. Within the remains, temples and shrines emerge as silent witnesses to rituals once practiced with meticulous devotion. Evidence of altars, carefully arranged stones, and offerings suggests the intertwining of civic authority and religious life, where governance and worship could not be easily separated. These sacred spaces appear deliberately positioned, facing the life-giving rivers and fertile valleys below, reflecting a worldview in which political power and spiritual influence reinforced one another. Yet much of their purpose remains enigmatic, leaving room for speculation and wonder about the beliefs that guided a people now long gone. Stone-paved streets curve between fortified gateways, suggesting an urban design that balanced accessibility with security. The arrangement of roads, platforms and walls hints at deliberate planning, a city engineered to withstand both siege and natural hardship. Gates were not merely defensive, they served as thresholds of ceremonial importance, places where officials and pilgrims would have passed under watchful eyes. Even in ruin, the layout conveys a sense of deliberate order, a rhythm that once structured the lives of those who dwelled here and organised the flow of trade, labour and ritual. Etched inscriptions on steles and fragmented royal decrees offer tantalising glimpses of dynasties long vanished. Some record the names of rulers, others hint at treaties, taxes or ceremonial dedications, but all are incomplete, their full meaning obscured by the passage of centuries. Each line, each carved character evokes curiosity and frustration in equal measure, as though the city itself is teasing observers with secrets partially revealed. The interplay between stone and word transforms Tel Dan into both a historical archive and a puzzle, with its significance remaining tantalizingly just out of reach. Certain chambers and platforms remain only partially explored, their original functions lost to time and collapse. Narrow passageways, raised terraces and enigmatic depressions suggest spaces that may have served civic, ceremonial or defensive purposes, yet no excavation or study has yielded definitive answers. The ambiguity of these structures adds a layer of tension to the site, for every discovery generates new questions. Who constructed these spaces, for what reason, and what events unfolded within their shadowed confines? The ruins refuse to surrender their story fully, preserving an aura of mystery. Evidence of fire, broken masonry and layers of debris reveal episodes of destruction that the city endured over generations. Some layers hint at violent siege, others at accidental catastrophe or internal conflict, yet the precise events remain open to interpretation. The sequence of building, burning and rebuilding traces a pattern of resilience and vulnerability, reflecting the tenuous nature of power at the frontier. Tel Dan, in its ruined form, embodies both permanence and impermanence, a city continuously reshaped by human ambition, natural forces and historical circumstance. The surrounding rivers and springs were lifelines, nourishing agriculture and daily life while simultaneously lending the city symbolic significance. Watercourses cut through the landscape, shaping the settlement's layout and feeding rituals that honoured life and abundance. These natural features also provided strategic advantages, forming barriers against invaders and marking the edges of property or sacred space. Their presence reminds observers that Tel Dan was not an isolated construct, but an integrated part of a landscape that simultaneously demanded reverence, utility and respect. Artifacts such as pottery shards, tools and remnants of trade goods hint at the vibrant life of the city's inhabitants. Merchants, artisans and farmers left behind traces of daily activity, suggesting a society engaged in both local and regional exchange. Markets, workshops and homes likely thrived alongside temples and fortifications, creating a complex urban ecosystem. Yet what was once bustling is now silent, leaving only objects to hint at human movement, commerce and interaction, preserving the ghostly echoes of everyday life in a city that continues to fascinate and frustrate historians. Careful mapping of walls, terraces and inscriptions has illuminated patterns of construction and use that spark both insight and speculation, yet rarely do these patterns reveal a complete narrative. The spatial relationships between buildings, roads and ritual sites suggest layers of planning and adaptation, but many questions remain. Why were certain gates emphasized while others were subordinated? What rituals occurred in particular courtyards? Why were some structures reinforced repeatedly while others were abandoned? Each answer seems to produce yet another question, prolonging the mystery of Tel Dan's past. The ruins radiate a presence that feels almost sentient, as though the city itself is a guardian of knowledge it will not fully share. Stones laid in meticulous alignment, inscriptions partially legible, and collapsed structures all contribute to an uncanny sense of observation. The city feels less like an abandoned ruin and more like a living repository of secrets, quietly challenging those who attempt to decipher it. Each step through the site reinforces a mixture of awe and uncertainty, a reminder that even the most concrete evidence can leave questions suspended in time. Even amid revealed gates and inscribed steles, Teldan conceals more than it reveals, leaving its ultimate history suspended between stone and shadow. The underground water system of Hazor. The ancient city of Hazor, one of Canaan's largest urban centres, conceals beneath its sun-baked ruins a hidden network that has fascinated archaeologists for decades. An underground water system meticulously carved into the limestone bedrock. Excavations reveal long tunnels, reservoirs and channels that allowed the city to endure prolonged sieges and droughts, though the true extent of the system remains partly concealed beneath layers of sediment and debris. Hazor's prominence in the Bible, most notably as a fortified city destroyed by Joshua according to the Book of Joshua, adds a weight of historical and religious significance that makes the subterranean engineering all the more compelling and enigmatic. The tunnels themselves vary in height and width, some barely allowing a single person to pass, while others broaden into chambers that may have served as hidden cisterns or storage areas. Their walls bear traces of chiselling and smoothing, evidence of skilled labour that suggests a society capable of complex engineering long before the advent of large-scale hydraulic machinery. The labyrinthine layout indicates careful planning, with multiple branching passages and concealed access points, implying that the water system was not merely functional but also strategically designed to confuse invaders and protect vital resources. Archaeologists have noted the deliberate positioning of intake points, which seem to tap natural springs at higher elevations outside the city walls. These channels then carried water deep into Hazor, creating reservoirs that could supply its population for weeks or even months if the city were under siege. The precision required to maintain a consistent slope and flow through uneven terrain points to an advanced understanding of hydraulics, yet much about the construction methods remains speculative, leaving open questions about the architects who conceived such a sophisticated underground network so early in human history. The connection between the tunnels and the city's fortifications is particularly striking. Certain passages terminate just inside or beneath the city gates, suggesting that defenders could access water without exposing themselves to external threats. Other sections appear to connect to storage rooms beneath key administrative or residential areas, perhaps allowing officials to monitor supply or secure food and drink during times of emergency. The integration of the water system with Hazor's overall urban plan hints at a civilization deeply aware of both practical necessity and the dangers posed by hostile neighbours. Despite centuries of excavation, portions of the system remain largely unexplored, concealed beneath layers of collapsed masonry and silt. Some tunnels reportedly extend for hundreds of metres, disappearing into the rock in a way that defies precise mapping. Modern archaeologists rely on ground-penetrating radar, laser scanning, and careful manual excavation to reveal the structure, yet the hidden chambers continue to provoke speculation about their original purpose. Were they strictly utilitarian, or did some serve ritual or ceremonial roles connected to Hazor's status as a significant Canaanite city in the biblical narrative? The historical record, including biblical references, provides context but few technical details. Hazor is mentioned in the Book of Joshua as the head of a confederation of cities, conquered and burned, leaving little behind above ground to hint at the ingenuity below. Yet even in ruin, the remnants of these tunnels suggest a city whose planners anticipated threats and sought to preserve life in extreme circumstances. The water system, therefore, becomes both a testament to human ingenuity and a lingering mystery, offering glimpses into a culture that existed millennia ago yet still speaks through its silent, hidden architecture. The archaeological study of Hazor's water system has revealed artifacts embedded within the tunnels, pottery shards, inscriptions, and occasional tools left behind by those who maintain the channels. These fragments provide tantalizing evidence of daily life intertwined with engineering, hinting that the tunnels were not merely static conduits, but spaces through which people moved, worked, and perhaps even conducted private rituals. Each piece recovered, no matter how small, enriches our understanding of the city and its underground world while raising new questions about the routines, priorities, and fears of its inhabitants. Hazor's water system also evokes the eerie sensation of walking in a space that has remained largely untouched for millennia. The air is cool and heavy, carrying echoes of human activity long vanished. Some tunnels descend into darkness that modern lighting barely penetrates, revealing irregular stone walls and chambers whose purposes are still debated. In such spaces, it becomes impossible not to imagine the anxieties of ancient citizens, families seeking refuge during an assault, workers tending channels in silence, and the constant pressing awareness that life above and below ground was precariously intertwined. One of the most puzzling features is the series of hidden shafts and vertical drops that link various levels of the system. These shafts could have allowed water to flow downward from higher springs or reservoirs, but their abrupt terminations suggest the possibility of concealed exits or escape routes. Scholars debate whether these were intended for drainage, ventilation, or secret passage, but their design demonstrates foresight and an intimate knowledge of subterranean construction. Such ingenuity reinforces the sense that Hazor's planners sought not only to survive, but to control their environment in ways that remain difficult to fully comprehend. Comparisons with other Canaanite and early Israelite sites underscore the uniqueness of Hazor's underground system. While cisterns and channels exist elsewhere in the region, few rival the scale, complexity, or integration with urban planning seen here. The system's resilience, capable of sustaining a city through both natural and human threats, marks it as exceptional, yet it also deepens the mystery. What level of social organization and technical skill was required to conceive and execute such an ambitious project in a time largely removed from written records and detailed accounts of engineering practice? Modern visitors to Hazor often remark on the simultaneous sense of wonder and unease the tunnels evoke. Moving through confined passages, navigating sharp turns and sudden drops, it is easy to sense the ingenuity that made survival possible, yet equally easy to feel the presence of history pressing close. The echoes of ancient footsteps mingle with the imagination's shadows, leaving a haunting impression that the city's secrets may extend far beyond what archaeology has yet revealed. Hazor's water system is not merely a relic, it is a living testament to human cunning and the fragility of life within the walls of an ancient metropolis. Each exploration uncovers new questions even as it provides answers. Measurements of water flow, studies of sediment deposits, and analyses of architectural techniques all contribute to a growing understanding, yet the system's full purpose remains partly obscured by time and destruction. The very existence of such tunnels beneath a biblical city challenges assumptions about early urban engineering and the sophistication of Canaanite civilization, reminding historians and visitors alike that, beneath the ruins, the past is not silent but concealed, waiting for those willing to descend into its depths. And somewhere beneath Hazor, the tunnels continue into darkness that may never fully surrender their secrets. The Lost Sanctuary of Shiloh. Shiloh once served as the spiritual heart of early Israel, a sanctuary whose ruins still hint at the presence of the Ark and long-concluded ceremonies. Though today the site appears quiet and unassuming, careful observation reveals the faint traces of walls, altars, and pathways that once guided priests and worshippers alike. Archaeologists and historians alike are drawn to the paradox of Shiloh, a place so central to Israelite worship that the Hebrew Bible repeatedly emphasizes its significance, yet so elusive in the physical record that even modern excavation leaves as many questions as answers. Excavators have revealed stone altars and foundation remnants, offering clues about a sacred complex whose full layout and original scale remain uncertain. The discovery of large stones arranged in rectangular formations suggests designated areas for sacrifice or assembly, while fragments of pottery scattered across the site indicate the everyday objects of ritual life. Each uncovered artifact seems to whisper of its former purpose, though scholars remain cautious, noting that the absence of detailed inscriptions or comprehensive records prevents a full reconstruction of the sanctuary's organization. Sunlight spills through fractured walls onto open courtyards, tracing the silent paths once walked by priests and worshippers, performing solemn rituals. The spaces between stone foundations, now overgrown with grass and wildflowers, allow the imagination to fill in what was once vibrant activity. Processions, offerings, and prayers that shaped the spiritual identity of an entire community. Even the uneven terrain speaks to the adaptation and labor of those who constructed the sanctuary, moving stones and shaping the landscape to suit the sacred functions of Shiloh. Biblical sources describe Shiloh as the foremost center of worship, yet the precise arrangement of its structures and the details of its ceremonies are largely lost. According to the Book of Joshua and the books of Samuel, Shiloh was the residence of the Ark of the Covenant before it was relocated to Jerusalem. References to the site emphasize its religious importance, but rarely provide architectural or logistical details. As a result, historians must rely on a combination of textual evidence and archaeological inference, creating a tapestry of knowledge threaded with as many uncertainties as certainties. Legends of the Ark's residence at Shiloh continue to intrigue historians, its disappearance leaving a profound emptiness where sacred presence once lingered. Scholars debate whether the Ark was lost during a Philistine invasion or quietly removed by the Israelites themselves, yet no definitive physical trace has been discovered at the site. The tension between the biblical narrative and the material record creates an air of mystery. A sanctuary built to house the holiest object in Israelite culture now yields little tangible proof of the Ark's former presence, leaving its story suspended between history and legend. Carved stones, ceremonial implements, and remnants of offerings reveal a meticulous devotion, shedding light on the spiritual practices that shape daily life. Altars display signs of repeated use, and fragments of pottery may have held grains, wine, or oil for ritual purposes. Even the smallest items, chisels, incense burners, or broken storage vessels, offer insight into the rhythms of worship and the careful attention given to ritual observance. Each object functions as a trace of human intent, a material echo of devotion long concluded yet never entirely erased. The city's placement and organisation suggest a society in which spiritual authority and civic governance were deeply intertwined, reflecting careful planning. Shiloh's location allowed it to serve as a gathering point for surrounding tribes, facilitating communal worship while reinforcing political cohesion. Roads leading to the sanctuary, though no longer fully visible, indicate coordinated construction and maintenance, highlighting the broader social importance of the site. In this way, Shiloh was not merely a religious centre but also a focal point for the organisation and identity of early Israelite society. Traces of abrupt desertion and partial destruction raise enduring questions about why the sanctuary was left behind and what might have vanished along with its inhabitants. Layers of ash, collapsed walls, and scattered artefacts suggest that Shiloh may have experienced a sudden upheaval, whether from military attack, internal conflict, or environmental pressures. The lack of definitive evidence leaves room for speculation, enhancing the sense of suspense that surrounds the site. A city of immense religious significance abandoned so completely that its full story cannot yet be reconstructed. Walking among the ruins today, one senses a profound stillness where sunlight and shadows stretch across broken courtyards, echoing ceremonies long concluded. The emptiness of the site contrasts sharply with its biblical descriptions, inviting reflection on the passage of time and the fragility of human endeavours. Even the wind seems to move through the stones, as if carrying whispers of ritual chants and prayers, a haunting reminder that the sanctuary was once alive with sacred purpose. Visitors cannot help but feel that much remains unseen, concealed beneath layers of history and earth. Shiloh's influence shaped subsequent sacred sites, leaving subtle imprints in ritual practice and architectural design that continued across generations. Elements of worship, spatial arrangement, and ceremonial protocol appear to have informed later centres, including Jerusalem, suggesting a continuity of tradition that extends far beyond the site's physical existence. In this sense, the sanctuary endures not through its stones alone, but through its legacy, etched into the spiritual memory of Israelite culture and the historical imagination of those who study it. Much of the sanctuary's purpose, structure, and lost treasures remain elusive, inspiring curiosity and careful speculation among those who study it. Archaeologists may measure walls, analyze artifacts, and reconstruct sequences of use, yet the full meaning of the space, the intentions of its builders, the significance of each altar, and the ultimate fate of the Ark remains partially concealed. The unanswered questions give Shiloh its enduring allure, a place that is at once thoroughly examined and stubbornly mysterious, where history and legend coexist in tension. Amid the quiet ruins, traces of forgotten devotion may still linger, unseen by human eyes, waiting for those willing to uncover the sanctuary's hidden truths. The Cave of Elijah on Mount Carmel. A sudden silence blankets the cliffs, broken only by the whisper of wind along stone, as if the mountain itself is holding the memory of a confrontation that reshaped faith. The cave attributed to Elijah clings to the steep slopes of Mount Carmel, its shadowed entrance tucked among the jagged rock formations that have weathered centuries of sun, rain, and wind. Though the site appears quiet today, the dramatic tale of fire and divine challenge once etched into scripture still hangs over it like a palpable presence, drawing scholars, pilgrims, and the curious to ponder what actually occurred in that secluded recess. Steep ridges descend toward olive groves and valleys below, creating natural terraces that would have shaped movement and ritual, while the wind carries the faint scent of salt and wild herbs from the sea. The mountain itself forms a labyrinth of stone and vegetation, channels and natural alcoves that may have guided human approach for worship, concealment, or strategic observation. From certain angles, the cliffs give a commanding view of the Mediterranean coastline, reminding visitors that geography and divine narrative were inseparable in the lives of those who sought both protection and inspiration here. The prophet's confrontation with the prophets of Baal is immortalized in scripture, marking this cliffside as a place where divine power and human devotion intersected amid thunder and fire. According to 1 Kings, Elijah challenged the prophets atop Mount Carmel, invoking God to send fire from heaven upon the altar he prepared. The story emphasizes drama and certainty, yet it leaves tantalizing gaps. The exact location of the encounter, the configuration of altars, and the physical space occupied by the participants are matters of conjecture. These gaps deepen the aura of mystery surrounding the cave. Stone surfaces inside and around the cave bear traces of human activity, carvings, depressions, and worn surfaces that hint at centuries of visitation, though the full purpose of these marks remains uncertain. Archaeological notes mention shallow grooves that may have held offerings, areas smoothed by repeated foot traffic, and small niches where objects could have rested. None of these features can be definitively tied to Elijah himself, yet each artifact underscores the cave's long-standing connection to ritual and reverence. The boundary between legend and tangible history blurs, leaving observers to piece together a narrative from subtle traces. Dark recesses stretch toward the back of narrow passages, where jagged rock formations seem to close in, fostering a sense of isolation that mirrors the solitude described in the biblical account. Light from the entrance barely penetrates the farthest corners, casting irregular shadows that shift with the sun's movement. In these spaces, one can almost hear the imagined sounds of chants, the quiet reverence of a lone prophet, or the tension before the divine fire descended. The cave's structure amplifies this eerie intimacy, creating a physical echo of the spiritual confrontation that defines its legacy. Pilgrims and chroniclers have long sought this site, recording prayers, leaving offerings, and commemorating the story of Elijah, ensuring that the cave's significance reverberates far beyond its stone confines. Visitors throughout history have carved inscriptions, left small tokens, or marked paths to honor the sacred narrative. These layered human interventions transform the site into a palimpsest of devotion, blending contemporary gestures with centuries-old legend. The interplay of tangible evidence and intangible belief strengthens the cave's enigmatic reputation, linking the physical location to enduring spiritual memory. Scholars continue to question the cave's original purpose, whether it served as a hermit's retreat, a concealed altar, or a symbolic marker of divine intervention, each possibility sustaining the aura of uncertainty. Some suggest that the cave's position atop a steep ridge offered safety, solitude, and a vantage point for observation, while others argue it functioned more as a ceremonial landmark than a dwelling. Archaeology provides hints but no full answers, and the lack of definitive inscriptions or artifacts leaves the true nature of its use suspended between speculation and possibility. Erosion has carved the surrounding cliffs and softened the edges of the cave entrance, while centuries of wind and rain have worn smooth the stone surfaces that once bore traces of human hands. Cracks and fissures trace unpredictable patterns along the rock, subtly reshaping the cave and its surroundings over time. These natural processes have concealed certain features and revealed others, turning the landscape into a dynamic record of environmental change, human presence, and geological persistence. Even the mountain itself seems to guard its secrets, allowing only fragments of history to emerge. Those who climb the rugged paths today speak of an uncanny stillness, where shafts of sunlight cut through narrow openings and shadows seem to shift in subtle, unexplained ways. Every step along the steep trail heightens awareness of isolation and scale, and the uneven terrain demands attention, reinforcing a sense that this is a place set apart from ordinary life. The air carries a mixture of salt, soil and stone, and the faint murmur of distant waves underscores the dramatic tension between the natural world and the sacred story embedded in these cliffs. The blend of biblical narrative, archaeological clues and folklore makes the cave a living puzzle, where imagination and observation intersect, challenging scholars to separate history from enduring myth. Local traditions speak of the cave as a site of vision and prophecy, while textual records from travellers offer varied accounts of its interior. The combination of evidence, conjecture and spiritual reverence encourages exploration, yet discourages definitive conclusions, preserving a sense of awe and mystery that has persisted through generations. Significant aspects of the cave remain unresolved. Its precise use, the design and location of vanished structures, and whether hidden relics linger unseen among the rock formations. While its association with Elijah is deeply embedded in religious consciousness, the physical evidence provides only tantalizing hints of the rituals, retreats, or events that may have occurred here. Each unanswered question magnifies the sense of mystery, leaving the cave suspended between story and tangible reality, a place where the past quietly presses against the present. Silent in the folds of Mount Carmel, the echoes of Elijah's confrontation may endure, waiting for someone daring enough to discover them. The burned house of Jerusalem. Smoke-stained pottery rests in place, frozen as if its owners might return at any moment, while the scent of charred wood seems to linger centuries after the flames consume the walls. Stepping into the house uncovered during excavations feels like walking into a suspended moment of history, where ordinary domestic life collided abruptly with the destructive force of a Roman siege. The floors are layered with ash, soot and debris, yet, even in ruin, the objects retain a haunting intimacy, telling a story of families caught in the sweep of monumental events. Each artifact seems to tremble with a quiet testimony of lives interrupted. Occasionally, small shadows appear across the walls as sunlight filters through the collapsed roof, and one can almost imagine fleeting movements, fleeting gestures of those who once inhabited these rooms. Excavation teams unearthed collapsed beams and scorched floorboards, revealing a house miraculously preserved beneath layers of ash amid the ruins of Jerusalem. The walls, partially standing, display soot-blackened plaster, and carefully laid stones hint at architectural techniques of the period. Archaeologists carefully documented each room, noting collapsed ceilings and warped door frames, capturing both the ordinary functionality and the sudden violence that befell this home. Each meticulous record preserves evidence of panic and destruction, yet also raises questions about what remains hidden beneath the debris, secrets that time and fire have yet to reveal. The space feels intimate, as though it might conceal whispered stories that no historical account could ever capture. A half-filled jug sits near the hearth, its contents long evaporated, alongside broken cooking implements and scattered grains that hint at the final meal interrupted by catastrophe. Nearby, a basket of charred seeds and a small cooking stone suggest domestic routines abruptly ended, yet untouched by human hands since that fateful moment. The juxtaposition of ordinary life and extraordinary destruction produces a haunting tension. Here was a household preparing for the evening, perhaps unaware of the fire and siege that would soon engulf the city, leaving everything suspended in an eternal echo of daily life. Even the arrangement of objects suggests hurried movements or interrupted tasks, as if invisible hands vanished in mid-motion, leaving a frozen choreography of survival abruptly abandoned. Blackened timbers and cracked plaster testify to the sudden violence of the Roman siege, capturing a moment of destruction with uncanny immediacy. The flames, intense and unrelenting, left structural beams charred but not entirely consumed, while walls collapsed in jagged patterns that mirror the chaos outside. Smoke residue adheres stubbornly to the stones, as if the house itself bears witness to the panic, the cries, and the desperate attempts to survive. One can trace patterns of heat and collapse that hint at the fire's path, imagining how each room is filled with smoke and chaos. In some corners, faint impressions of furniture or household items remain, almost like ghostly shadows that linger in the burned space. This house stands as a silent witness to the broader devastation of 70 AD, when the city fell to Roman forces, leaving countless lives abruptly ended and streets smouldering. Contemporary accounts describe the overwhelming destruction of the urban landscape, fires that consumed neighbourhoods, the collapse of city gates, and the systematic eradication of buildings. Amidst this sweeping history, the house offers an intimate counterpoint, a singular contained story of domestic life, tragedy, and the sudden intrusion of historical violence into private existence. It is a reminder that history's grand events are composed of countless individual experiences. Walking among the ruins, one feels the weight of this juxtaposition, immense historical forces and fragile personal moments intertwining in a single preserved space. Shreds of cloth, a partially open chest, and the faint outline of a collapsed wall suggest the personal routines and private corners of a household lost to time. Clothing remnants hint at daily wear, the folds of linen telling of those who moved within the house. The chest, tipped and empty, might once have contained valuables, documents, or treasured items, yet all that remains are impressions in ash and dust. These minute details create an eerie intimacy. They allow modern observers to reconstruct life at a human scale, even as the identities and fates of the occupants remain unknown. Small indentations in the floor or on the walls suggest hurried steps, frantic attempts to carry belongings, leaving traces of invisible hands frozen forever. Small rooms with low ceilings, storage niches, and the arrangement of hearths reveal much about urban domestic life in Jerusalem at the peak of the Second Temple period. The house was compact yet carefully organised, with spaces allocated for cooking, sleeping, and storing supplies. Every architectural choice, placement of windows, thickness of walls, and design of hearths speaks to practical concerns, while simultaneously offering subtle insight into cultural priorities and the rhythms of daily life. One can imagine the quiet routines of mornings and evenings, now disrupted forever, a haunting reminder of how swiftly ordinary existence can be obliterated. Layers of ash and debris, hardened over centuries, have protected delicate items that might otherwise have vanished, creating a window into the sudden end of ordinary life. Tiny artifacts such as a clay lamp, small ceramic bowl, and a cooking implement survived because of the very fire that destroyed the house. Preservation born of catastrophe turns tragedy into revelation, offering rare insights into materials, construction methods, and domestic habits. Each preserved item seems to hold a fragment of a story, whispering hints of meals prepared, hands that laboured, and lives abruptly interrupted. Even in its ruin, the house hums with an almost imperceptible sense of presence, as if the past still lingers in the air. Analysis of the remaining structure hints at the sequence of events that led to the house's ruin, offering glimpses into past chaos while leaving many mysteries unsolved. The placement of debris, patterns of collapse, and intensity of fire damage suggest moments of panic, attempts to salvage possessions, or even the sudden flight of occupants. Yet gaps remain. No inscription identifies the inhabitants. No skeletal remains have been conclusively linked to this house, and much of the story is inferred from absence as much as from presence. The silence of these unanswered questions amplifies the tension, making every charred corner a place of speculation and unease. Today's observers tread carefully over the charred threshold, sensing the weight of history, the silent presence of those who lived and perished here, and the stillness that has settled over the ruins. Archaeologists, historians, and visitors alike confront a space where time feels suspended, where the ordinary is inseparable from the extraordinary. Even amid urban surroundings, the house stands as a solemn reminder of lives abruptly ended, a testament to how history's grandeur intersects with the vulnerability of individual households, and a locus where silence is as compelling as evidence. Shadows of visitors flicker across the walls, momentarily blending with the echoes of those long gone. Countless mysteries endure, the identities of the occupants, the final moments before the destruction, and whether any hidden relics remain buried beneath the ash. Each unanswered question deepens the sense of suspense, as scholars and enthusiasts alike piece together fragments of evidence, aware that some aspects may remain forever elusive. The house itself, preserved yet silent, continues to provoke reflection on human fragility, sudden disaster, and the traces that survive long after lives have vanished. The ashes and rubble, though cold and still, retain a sense of urgency, as if pressing observers to search, to imagine, and to wonder. Amidst the scorched walls and scattered remnants, the vanished lives of this household whisper their secrets, waiting for someone to listen. The ancient gate of Lachish. Echoes of past battles cling to the stones, as though the fury of the Assyrian siege still vibrates through the ruined gate. The air carries a faint sense of tension, almost like a residue of panic frozen in time, while the massive threshold and flanking walls stand as mute witnesses to an event described in both biblical accounts and Assyrian records. Dust settles in the corners where defenders once moved with purpose, and shadows of ancient activity seem to flicker across the crumbling masonry. Walking near the gate, one senses the collision of human ambition, violence and survival, a story captured in stone long after the city itself fell silent. The silence is not empty. It hums with speculation, a reminder that countless stories remain unspoken and unseen within these ruins. Archaeologists uncovered the massive threshold and flanking walls, their precise stonework revealing both defensive purpose and unexpected craftsmanship. Carefully carved stones, fitted without mortar, bear witness to skilled hands and meticulous planning. Excavation notes highlight how some blocks remain almost untouched by time, while others show the marks of destruction, scorched surfaces, fractured edges, and traces of battering that hint at an intense and sudden assault. Even the smallest stones reveal the careful balance of strength and design, raising questions about how the gate could have withstood repeated attacks before succumbing to overwhelming force. Each uncovered detail suggests that more could be hidden beneath rubble yet untouched by modern tools, waiting silently for discovery. Scorch marks and fractured bricks trace the relentless assault, while remnants of siege ramps and projectiles hint at strategies long vanished. Evidence of battering rams, fire and structural collapse marks the assault as systematic and violent. Burned timbers, fragmented masonry and dents in stone tell a story of relentless pressure from invaders determined to breach the city's defences. Yet, the precise trajectory of the attack remains partially obscured, leaving archaeologists to speculate on the timing, the coordination of forces, and the human drama that unfolded behind these walls. Some marks are inexplicable, resisting definitive explanation, as though the gate itself guards certain truths. Impressions of hurried footsteps and worn stone edges suggest the human presence that once animated this fortress entrance, now silent for millennia. Tiny scuff marks, depressions in stone thresholds, and eroded corners indicate the repeated passage of soldiers, guards, and civilians seeking safety. The gate was more than a barrier. It was a crossroads of life and death, of strategy and desperation. Each scar on the stones hints at movement, urgency, and perhaps even the terror of those who face sudden violent confrontation just beyond the gate's walls. Occasionally, subtle traces provoke questions. Did someone leave a mark of warning, or was it an accidental impression that survived by chance? The gate's role in biblical history resonates through inscriptions and accounts, marking it as both a tactical prize and a symbol of domination. Lachish was more than a fortified city. It was a node of communication, governance, and spiritual significance. Assyrian annals describe its conquest with detail that matches archaeological findings, yet the personal experiences of its defenders remain hidden. The juxtaposition of official record and silent ruin intensifies the sense of mystery, revealing how grand narratives often obscure individual human stories embedded within walls, thresholds, and narrow passages. It is as if the gate whispers only fragments, letting historians hear echoes but not the full voice of the past. Complex masonry and thick defensive walls illustrate engineering designed to repel invaders, yet even this resilience was ultimately tested by overwhelming force. The gate's double wall structure, corner towers, and heavy thresholds reveal careful planning intended to withstand protracted assaults. Still, despite its formidable construction, evidence of collapse and scorched bricks shows how human ingenuity met unrelenting external pressure. The remaining structure hints at both triumph and failure, an eternal paradox captured in stone, inviting observers to consider what might have happened within the city as attackers breached its defences. Shadows of the past seem to linger in corners where the stones jut at unusual angles, provoking speculation about what might have been hidden there. Scattered artifacts, from pottery shards to carved seals, offer subtle clues to the routines of administrators, traders, and guards stationed here. Small inscriptions and fragments reveal not only daily activity but also the broader organisation of city life. Seals once used to mark documents or goods survive as faint impressions in clay, hinting at the administrative and economic pulse of Lachish. Each relic carries with it an air of mystery, a whisper of decisions made, orders given, and lives intertwined with the gate that served as both entrance and sentinel over the city's fortunes. Some artifacts seem oddly placed, raising questions about whether they were intentionally left behind or displaced during the chaos of the siege. Scholars continue to debate the exact sequence of the gate's destruction, piecing together fragmentary evidence while acknowledging gaps that may never be resolved. Some argue that fire preceded structural collapse. Others suggest a sudden breach by battering rams or siege towers. Inscriptions and remnants of weaponry provide clues, yet questions persist. Who survived? What strategies were employed? And how long the city resisted? The gate, as both a ruin and a document in stone, challenges historians to reconcile conflicting evidence and embrace uncertainty as part of its enduring mystery. Each new hypothesis brings fresh intrigue, but none can claim to tell the complete story. Modern researchers tread cautiously across the ruined threshold, sensing the weight of past conflict and the lingering presence of unseen witnesses. The ground is uneven with debris, yet every step reveals small details, stones worn by centuries of use, subtle impressions of shields or boots, and tiny cracks that speak to forces exerted in the chaos of battle. Even today, the gate evokes a powerful sense of human tension, frozen in time, bridging the gap between contemporary study and ancient turmoil, where every artifact and scar resonates with stories that remain partially untold. Occasionally, a gust of wind stirs dust in patterns that suggest motion, as if the gate remembers what human memory has long forgotten. Questions endure: the fate of defenders, the precise timeline of attacks, and whether any hidden caches remain beneath the debris, untouched and forgotten. Each unanswered question deepens the tension, offering a reminder that history is as much about what is missing as what survives. Every stone seems to hold a secret, every collapsed corner a silent narrative, challenging observers to imagine the full drama of siege, survival, and loss. Even decades of excavation leave space for speculation, inviting those who study Lachish to confront the unknown. The silence in some chambers is so profound that it almost seems to expect answers that may never come. Silent stones bear testimony to lives intertwined with siege and strategy, each scar and mark a reminder of sudden upheaval and enduring mystery. The gate's ruins are at once a physical threshold and a temporal one, linking past events to the present moment of observation. As light shifts across weathered walls and broken arches, the interplay of shadow and structure suggests movement frozen in time, a frozen choreography of human courage, panic, and determination. Every visit brings fresh reflection, yet the gate keeps its ultimate story partially veiled, a challenge to all who seek its secrets. The echoes of clashing forces, whispered warnings, and hurried decisions seem almost tangible if one listens closely enough. Time has left the gate in ruins, yet the echoes of those who once passed through it continue to guard secrets no historian has yet unravelled. The mysterious stone circles of Gilgal. Their circular forms defy easy explanation, rising from the Jordan Valley with a precision that suggests purpose beyond mere coincidence. Even from a distance, the arrangement commands attention. Stones placed in deliberate arcs, some towering, others barely waist-high, forming concentric circles that seem to interact with the landscape. The sheer scale suggests more than casual labour, hinting at a coordinated effort that would have required planning, knowledge, and perhaps ritual oversight. Each stone, weathered by millennia, seems positioned not only for stability but for an unseen effect, casting shadows or reflecting light in ways that invite questions yet provide no answers. The emptiness around the site intensifies the impression that something once vital occurred here, now lost to time. Massive stones arranged in concentric patterns hint at careful planning and a scale that challenges assumptions about early Israelite construction. Some circles extend over tens of meters, each stone carefully set to balance size, weight, and spacing. Their alignment and symmetry suggest that the builders possessed geometric awareness and a deliberate aesthetic sense. Yet no records indicate why such effort was expended here, leaving only the evidence of craftsmanship and a lingering sense of mystery. The spatial organisation conveys a rhythm or code, a language of stones that observers today struggle to interpret fully, as if the creators intended the meaning to remain partially obscured. Excavations around the site revealed fragments of pottery and unusual stone alignments, each discovery deepening the sense of deliberate design. Pottery shards, often unremarkable at first glance, offer subtle insights into daily life, ceremonial activity, and the era in which the circles were used. Unearthed tools suggest repeated human activity, perhaps seasonal gatherings or rituals tied to cycles of planting and harvest. The stone arrangements themselves sometimes contain subtle irregularities, as if to encode knowledge or mark a sequence of events. Every fragment found within and near the circles feels loaded with significance, hinting at patterns now lost to memory yet intentionally preserved in material form. Carved marks and subtle grooves in some stones imply human intent, possibly connected to ceremonies or observations we can only speculate about. Faint incisions suggest repetitive action, a hand repeatedly striking or scraping for a purpose long since forgotten. Scholars have proposed that these marks might align with celestial events or lunar cycles, though no consensus has emerged. The tactile evidence of human touch on stones that have endured thousands of years evokes a profound connection to those who once moved among these formations, leaving traces of thought and ritual that survive only as hints. The stones seem to retain the presence of their makers, silent but insistent. Placed within the broader landscape of early settlements, the circles appear as focal points in a cultural and religious web long since obscured by time. Nearby villages and agricultural terraces indicate a population capable of sustained labour and organised social structures. The circle's location, neither entirely isolated nor fully integrated into settlement grids, suggests intentional placement, perhaps for gatherings that balance privacy with communal significance. Their prominence in the landscape may have created a visual landmark, a site of orientation or memory, giving the impression that the builders understood not just physical construction, but the psychological effect of scale and visibility on those who approached. Theories of ritual or astronomical significance abound, yet the circles continue to resist definitive explanation, their meaning concealed in plain sight. Some propose that the circles marked sacred boundaries or ceremonial arenas. Others suggest they recorded astronomical events or seasonal cycles. Despite decades of research, no evidence conclusively favours one interpretation over another. The ambiguity itself seems deliberate, as if the site's creators intended to provoke awe, reflection, or secrecy. Each theory illuminates part of the picture while leaving wide gaps, ensuring that the stone circles maintain a potent aura of enigma that draws the curious but defies complete understanding. The surrounding hills and plains frame the stones in ways that suggest careful attention to sightlines, elevation, and perhaps natural markers now lost to memory. From certain vantage points, the circles align with distant ridges or depressions in the landscape, hinting at observational intent. Sunlight moves across the stones in patterns that shift with the seasons, offering fleeting glimpses of angles and shadows that may have held meaning. The environmental context, combined with the precision of placement, evokes the possibility that the builders sought not only functional or ceremonial use, but a form of communication with the land itself, a dialogue partially erased by centuries of erosion and neglect. Small tools and worn stones unearthed nearby hint at construction techniques and repeated activity, suggesting that these formations were more than occasional gatherings. Flint implements, hammerstones, and traces of quarrying point to deliberate shaping and placement, not random arrangement. The wear on some stones suggests they were touched or moved over generations, reinforcing the idea that the site was actively maintained and observed. Even minor fragments carry significance. The way a stone tilts, a groove catches light, or a footprint preserves its impression conveys evidence of human intention and repeated interaction with a space imbued with importance. Debates among scholars range from ceremonial altar to astronomical observatory, each interpretation revealing as much about modern imagination as ancient practice. Some argue that the site functioned as a pilgrimage destination, others that it was used to predict seasonal change or track celestial bodies. Yet each hypothesis confronts gaps in evidence and limitations of context, reminding observers that certainty is elusive. The persistent disagreement among experts enhances the site's aura, transforming stones into questions and leaving every visitor to confront the tension between observable fact and speculative meaning. This layered uncertainty becomes part of the experience itself. Photographs and surveys from contemporary research reveal patterns invisible to the casual eye, yet the deeper purpose of the circles remains elusive and haunting. Drone imagery, LiDAR scans, and detailed mapping expose alignments and concentric formations that human eyes alone might miss. Even with these modern tools, the interpretation of patterns requires conjecture, forcing observers to consider intent, scale, and human cognition in a prehistoric context. The circles resist total comprehension, offering glimpses of an order that may no longer fully correspond to anything living memory can confirm. Every new technological observation seems to deepen rather than resolve the mystery. Even under the open sky, the circles convey a sense of restraint and secrecy, as though every stone holds a fragment of knowledge meant to remain half-hidden. The low hum of wind across the plain and the occasional caw of a distant bird accentuate a profound quiet that seems charged with meaning. Footsteps across the terrain feel intrusive, yet they also awaken echoes of human activity long past, reminding observers that the site's purpose may have been as much symbolic as practical. Every circle, every line, every carefully positioned stone communicates a silent language, part of which we may never decode but can sense with intuitive attention. Below the silent arrangement of stones at Gilgal, the echoes of ceremonies never recorded stir faintly, daring the present to uncover what the past left intentionally hidden. The hidden cave of John the Baptist. A hush lingers in the cave, as if the walls themselves guard secrets too delicate for daylight. The air carries a weight that feels almost sacred, and every step across the uneven stone floor seems amplified in the stillness. The darkness does not merely conceal, it suggests intention, a deliberate seclusion that invites reflection while concealing the acts once performed within. The cave's narrow entrance opens into a space where history and legend intersect, leaving traces of human presence without revealing the full story. Even centuries later, the silence seems to pulse with echoes of movement, prayer, and quiet contemplation. Small pockets of sediment in the floor suggest that people lingered here for extended periods, arranging rocks and ash in ways that hint at ritualized practice. A faint earthy aroma, the product of centuries of natural seepage, mingles with these human traces, further intensifying the impression of a space set apart from the ordinary world. Narrow chambers twist unpredictably, and every shadowed corner hints at spaces once used for solitude or ritual. Some passages widen into small alcoves, others terminate abruptly against rough-hewn walls, creating pockets of intimacy that would have accommodated individual devotion. The uneven surfaces bear subtle marks of human touch, worn smooth by hands and feet over time, suggesting repeated use. Each turn reveals a new dimension of the cave, and the interplay of light and shadow evokes the impression that the builders and users intended to manipulate perception, crafting spaces that heighten the spiritual and emotional experience. In certain corners, small ledges seem to have been intentionally shaped to hold vessels or other objects, indicating a blend of practical and sacred functions, and the cumulative effect is one of deliberate concealment, as though the cave itself was a guardian of private devotion. Faint carvings etched into stone walls suggest symbols of devotion, though their exact meaning has long eluded scholars. Crosses, simple geometric shapes, and lines running in patterns appear at first random, but hint at intentional arrangement. The precision of some incisions suggests ritual significance, while others might have served practical purposes, marking paths or designating sacred areas. Attempts to decipher these markings reveal a language lost to time, fragments of communication between the past and present, leaving observers with tantalizing glimpses of intent but no definitive answers. Some carvings appear layered, with one set overlaid on another, implying the site was used across generations and hinting at a continuity of spiritual practice that remains invisible to modern eyes. Small niches and depressions in the rock hint at offerings or artifacts carefully placed by hands now vanished. Each cavity varies in depth and width, some appearing deliberately carved, others naturally formed but later adapted. Traces of residue, perhaps from incense or oil, suggest ceremonial use, and the placement of these hollows near entrances and inner chambers implies conscious spatial planning. These subtle details convey the presence of people engaged in ritualized behavior, actions both private and communal, that have left only faint material traces for modern researchers to study. Evidence of soot from small fires and discoloration of rock surfaces further points to intentional use of flame for illumination, purification, or symbolic purposes, adding another layer to the enigmatic practices performed here. The cave's entrance remains almost hidden, blending seamlessly with the surrounding hills, yet it directs attention inward, toward hidden recesses. From the outside, one might pass without notice, yet those who enter are immediately enveloped in a contained world of stone and shadow. The concealment amplifies the sense of sacredness, creating a threshold that separates the ordinary from the extraordinary. Light filters in unevenly, illuminating only portions of the chambers at specific times, hinting that environmental conditions were part of the cave's design or selection. In addition, small water channels and depressions along the floor suggest careful management of moisture, possibly to maintain the cave's interior for human occupation or ceremonial purification, further supporting its intentional use. Tradition holds that John the Baptist sought isolation here, a place where waters, rock, and air combined into a spiritual sanctuary. Streams or runoff trickle through certain sections of the cave, providing a source of sustenance and the symbolic cleansing associated with baptism. The proximity to natural features such as springs or small pools reinforces the site's ritual relevance, linking the physical environment to biblical accounts of John's ministry. Though certainty is impossible, the evidence of human adaptation to the cave's natural contours supports the notion that it was chosen for both practicality and spiritual significance. The natural acoustics of the cave may have amplified chants or prayers, lending a mystical quality to the rituals conducted within its walls, reinforcing the cave's symbolic power. Fragments of pottery and simple tools discovered inside provide tangible links to the individuals who inhabited or visited these quiet chambers. Unglazed vessels, chipped edges, and rudimentary implements speak to daily functions intertwined with ritual practice. Even small items, like stone scrapers or carved utensils, suggest that life within the cave was carefully organized, perhaps to sustain periods of solitude or to accommodate ritual preparation. These objects, though modest, anchor the cave firmly in historical human activity, bridging legend with material reality. Analysis of the pottery's composition reveals sourcing from nearby regions, indicating that the cave may have drawn visitors from multiple settlements, perhaps reflecting its importance as a spiritual waypoint. Researchers debate whether the site was primarily a hermitage, a pilgrimage destination, or a place of secret ritual, each theory revealing a fragment of possible history. Some argue that John may have used it as a retreat from the public eye, while others posit that followers or early Christians visited for guidance or symbolic reenactment. No single explanation satisfies all the evidence, leaving the cave suspended between conjecture and documentation. The diversity of interpretation underscores the cave's enigmatic power, inviting scholars and visitors alike to confront the limits of understanding. Even the combination of practical elements, water, storage, and sleeping niches, with sacred markings complicates efforts to categorize the space neatly. Modern documentation, including photography and 3D scanning, reveals subtle details invisible to the naked eye, yet many aspects remain unresolved. High-resolution imaging exposes faint grooves, shallow depressions, and faint inscriptions previously overlooked. LiDAR mapping reveals the full extent of chambers and hidden passageways, emphasizing the cave's deliberate complexity. Still, each new technological insight only deepens the mystery, showing patterns and arrangements whose purpose is partially obscured by time, weathering, and human intervention. Advanced imaging has even detected traces of organic material embedded in crevices, hinting at ceremonial substances or offerings that may have decayed beyond recognition, leaving behind a whisper of human activity. Every crevice and echo in the cave seems to preserve the memory of devotion, while natural formations merge seamlessly with human intervention. Stalactites and small alcoves coexist with carved surfaces, creating a landscape both organic and constructed. Sounds reverberate oddly, amplifying quiet gestures or whispered speech, perhaps intentionally or coincidentally, creating an immersive auditory experience. The cave communicates on multiple sensory levels, blending sight, touch, and sound into a unified sense of presence that speaks to the spiritual practices once conducted there, leaving traces that transcend conventional historical evidence. The combination of natural light filtering through fissures and subtle reflections off carved surfaces creates shifting visual patterns, adding to the perception that the cave itself participates in ritual. Standing within the cave today, one senses a delicate tension between what is visible and what has been deliberately concealed across centuries. The ambient temperature, filtered light, and subtle moisture combine with the carefully placed carvings and depressions to create an environment charged with historical resonance. Even in the absence of human presence, the cave feels inhabited, as though it carries the intentions, prayers, and meditative practices of those who came before. The interplay of natural and human-made features ensures that visitors confront both what can be documented and what remains unknowable, sustaining the cave's aura of mystery. One might imagine the quiet ritual of water flowing over stone, the whisper of footsteps, and the soft sound of a voice reciting prayers, all lingering just out of reach of certainty. Somewhere in the dim recesses of the hidden cave, shadows of devotion and whispered prayers linger, hinting at secrets that even time has hesitated to reveal. The subterranean passages of Megiddo. Few travellers crossing the Jezreel Valley realise that beneath the ancient mound of Tel Megiddo lies a vast underground system carved deep into the bedrock to reach a hidden spring beyond the city's walls. Today the mound appears quiet, rising gently above the fertile fields of northern Israel, but the ground beneath it holds the remains of one of the most elaborate water systems ever constructed in the ancient Near East. Layers of collapsed buildings, temples, and fortifications have accumulated here for thousands of years, forming the archaeological hill that dominates the surrounding landscape. Hidden within those layers is a carefully designed passage that once allowed the inhabitants of Megiddo to reach water even when enemies surrounded the city. At the crossroads of ancient trade routes, Megiddo developed into one of the most strategically important cities in the region, controlling movement between Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Mediterranean coast. Caravans carrying metals, textiles, spices, and grain passed through this corridor for centuries, and whoever ruled the city could influence the flow of commerce across the entire region. Because of this position, Megiddo appears repeatedly in ancient records and biblical narratives, often associated with battles and shifting alliances between powerful kingdoms. The city's prominence made it prosperous, but it also made it vulnerable, drawing the attention of armies that sought to control the strategic gateway of the Jezreel Valley. Deep below the layered ruins of the city, a steep rock-cut shaft leads downward into a carefully engineered tunnel designed to secure water during times of siege. The passage begins inside the fortified area of the ancient settlement, concealed within the city's defences so that enemies outside the walls could not easily reach it. From this hidden entrance, the shaft drops sharply through the bedrock, forcing anyone descending it to follow a winding staircase carved directly into the rock. The design reflects a deliberate strategy. If hostile forces surrounded Megiddo, the inhabitants could still reach their water source without leaving the protection of the city. Carved directly into solid limestone, the descending staircase plunges more than 30 meters beneath the surface before turning into a long horizontal passage. The depth alone suggests an immense effort, as workers would have needed to cut through layers of hard stone using simple tools and careful planning. Each step had to be shaped precisely enough for people carrying jars or containers to move safely through the darkness. The tunnel itself stretches forward in a straight line toward the spring, creating a narrow corridor that once echoed with the footsteps of those responsible for keeping the city supplied with water. During early 20th century excavations, archaeologists gradually uncovered the enormous scale of this underground construction, while clearing debris that had filled the shaft for centuries. Teams working at Tel Megiddo removed layers of collapsed stone, soil, and rubble that had accumulated after the city's repeated destructions. As the passage slowly reappeared, its true size became clear, revealing one of the most impressive engineering achievements of the Iron Age in the region. The discovery confirmed that Megiddo's inhabitants had invested enormous labour in protecting their access to water, even if it meant cutting a tunnel deep beneath the city itself. Because Megiddo guarded a critical corridor of the ancient world, Reliable water inside the city walls could determine whether the settlement survived prolonged conflict. In many ancient cities, springs or wells lay outside the fortifications, leaving defenders vulnerable if an army blocked access to water. The builders of this system attempted to solve that weakness by redirecting access underground, allowing residents to move safely beneath the city rather than exposing themselves on the surface. This solution required careful understanding of the terrain and the location of the spring beyond the walls. Evidence within the tunnel points to construction during the Iron Age, a period when fortified cities across the ancient Kingdom of Israel expanded their defences against growing regional threats. Archaeologists studying the structure have compared it with similar water systems found at other sites, noting the shared strategy of securing springs through hidden passages. The work likely required skilled planners as well as large groups of labourers who spent months, perhaps years, cutting through the bedrock. Although the exact circumstances that prompted the construction remain uncertain, the scale of the project suggests a time when security was considered an urgent priority. Inside the dim corridor today, the chisel marks left by ancient workers remain visible along the walls, quietly preserving the physical traces of the effort required to cut through the bedrock. These marks appear as shallow grooves etched into the limestone, each one created by repeated blows from metal tools. In places, the walls still bear the uneven textures left behind during the excavation, reminders that every metre of the passage had to be carved by hand. Walking through the tunnel reveals how carefully the builders followed the natural contours of the rock while maintaining a consistent direction toward the spring. Visitors descending the long flight of steps often experience a gradual sense of isolation as sunlight disappears and the tunnel stretches silently ahead. The temperature cools noticeably underground, and the sounds of the modern landscape fade behind thick layers of stone. With each step deeper into the shaft, the outside world seems to recede, replaced by the narrow corridor carved thousands of years ago. The silence inside the passage can feel almost deliberate, as though the structure itself was designed to hide movement from those who might once have been watching the city from beyond its walls. Questions still surround the immense labour behind the passage, since carving such a system would have required careful planning, coordination, and an urgent reason to protect the city's water supply. Engineers had to determine the precise direction toward the spring while ensuring the tunnel remained stable and accessible. Mistakes in alignment or structural support could have rendered the entire project useless after months of work. Yet the completed passage demonstrates that the builders succeeded in linking the city to its hidden water source with remarkable precision. Layer upon layer of civilizations once stood above this tunnel, each rebuilding Megiddo after destruction and leaving behind the mound that archaeologists study today. Over centuries, the city rose and fell repeatedly, with new inhabitants constructing their own buildings atop the ruins of earlier settlements. These successive occupations gradually formed the tall archaeological mound visible today, burying the water system deeper beneath accumulated debris. The tunnel remained hidden for generations, preserved by the very layers of history that covered it. Near the end of the passage, the tunnel finally reaches the ancient spring outside the walls, revealing the true purpose of the entire underground network. Here, the corridor opens to the source of the water that sustained Megiddo's population during uncertain times. The builders had effectively concealed the approach to the spring beneath the city's defences, allowing residents to collect water without exposing themselves to enemy forces above ground. Standing at this point today, it becomes clear that the tunnel was not simply a feat of engineering, but a carefully calculated solution to one of the oldest challenges faced by fortified cities. Yet, even after centuries of study, the long descent beneath Megiddo still leaves the unsettling impression that the builders were preparing for a siege whose memory has long since disappeared from history. The forgotten city of Kirbet Qeiyafa. Across a quiet ridge overlooking the Elah Valley, a modest mound of stones conceals the remains of an ancient settlement now known as Kirbet Qeiyafa. The hilltop rises gently above the surrounding landscape, giving it a commanding view of the natural corridor that cuts through the valley below. From a distance, the site appears little more than a scatter of broken rocks and weathered earth, the kind of place easily overlooked by travellers crossing the region today. Yet beneath those stones lies the outline of a fortified city whose brief existence has stirred one of the most intriguing archaeological debates in the southern Levant. Archaeological attention intensified when excavations beginning in 2007 started revealing the unexpected outline of a fortified city beneath the scattered ruins. The work was led by archaeologists from Hebrew University of Jerusalem and the Israel Antiquities Authority, who initially approached the site as one more unexplored mound in a landscape filled with ancient settlements. As the upper layers were cleared away, however, massive stone walls began emerging in patterns that suggested careful planning rather than random accumulation. Slowly, the scattered stones resolved themselves into the defensive perimeter of a once organised city that had remained hidden in plain sight for centuries. Positioned above one of the most contested corridors of the ancient southern Levant, the settlement commanded a view over the route linking the coastal plain with the highlands of ancient Judah. Caravans moving inland from the Mediterranean would have passed through this valley, just as armies had done repeatedly across the centuries. The strategic value of such a position is difficult to overlook, especially in a region where rival kingdoms often competed for control of trade routes and fertile territory. Standing on the ridge today, it becomes clear why an ancient community would have chosen this location, where the land opens wide and distant movement can be seen long before it reaches the hill. Encircling the hilltop, a massive casemate wall constructed from large stones once defined the protective boundary of the city. This type of fortification consisted of two parallel walls with chambers built between them, a design that allowed the spaces to serve both as defensive structures and as storage or living areas. Archaeologists measured sections of the wall several meters thick, indicating a significant investment of labour and resources. The builders arranged the stones carefully without mortar, relying instead on precise placement and sheer weight to hold the structure together. Even after thousands of years of exposure, portions of these walls remained standing, giving a sense of the strength the city once possessed. Unusual architectural features soon drew attention to the presence of two monumental gates built into the city's defences. Fortified settlements in the region typically possessed a single main entrance, carefully guarded and controlled, yet Khirbet Qeiyafa revealed two large gate complexes on opposite sides of the wall. The discovery immediately raised questions about how the city functioned and why its designers chose such an uncommon layout. Some researchers noted that the Hebrew word sha'arayim, mentioned in the biblical account of the battle between David and Goliath in the valley below, means two gates. Although the connection remains debated, the coincidence has only deepened curiosity surrounding the site. Residential structures discovered along the interior of the fortifications revealed that homes had been integrated directly into the defensive walls. These houses shared the same stone foundations as the casemate chambers, suggesting that everyday life unfolded alongside the city's protective barriers. Excavations uncovered courtyards, storage areas, and simple living spaces that once housed families who depended on the city's defences for survival. Pottery fragments, animal bones, and grinding stones indicate routine domestic activity, reminders that the settlement was not merely a fortress, but a functioning community. Life inside those walls must have balanced ordinary routines, with the constant awareness of potential danger beyond the valley. A small pottery shard bearing several lines of ancient writing added another layer of intrigue to the site's significance. Known as the Khirbet Qeiyafa Ostracon, the fragment contains faint ink inscriptions written in an early alphabetic script. Scholars have debated the language and meaning of the text, with some suggesting it reflects early Hebrew writing while others propose a broader regional script. Although the message remains partially obscured, the existence of written text at the site hints at administrative or cultural complexity within the settlement. Even a few faded lines of ink can reveal how literacy and communication may have developed in communities once thought to be far simpler. Scientific testing of organic remains recovered from the ruins helped establish a more precise time frame for the city's occupation. Carbon dating of olive pits and other plant material placed the settlement in the late 11th to early 10th century BCE, a period associated with the early development of kingdoms in the region. This time frame has drawn particular attention because it overlaps with the era traditionally linked to the rise of the biblical kingdom of Judah. Some archaeologists argue that the scale of construction at Khirbet Qeiyafa suggests centralized authority capable of organizing large building projects. Others caution that the evidence may simply reflect a regional fortified outpost rather than a royal city. Signs of habitation suggest that the settlement remained active only for a relatively brief period before being abandoned. Unlike cities that grew through many centuries of rebuilding, Khirbet Qeiyafa appears to have existed for only a few decades. The reasons for its sudden disappearance remain uncertain, as no clear evidence points to a single catastrophic event. Some researchers believe shifting political boundaries may have made the site unnecessary once regional control changed. Others speculate that conflict or economic pressure could have forced the inhabitants to leave, allowing the structures to slowly fall silent. Gradually buried beneath soil and vegetation, the ruins faded from memory long before modern archaeologists began exploring the hill. Wind carried dust across the valley while seasonal rains softened the edges of the ancient stones, blending the city back into the landscape that once gave it life. Shepherds may have passed the hill for generations without realizing that a fortified settlement slept beneath their feet. Only careful excavation eventually revealed the shape of streets, homes, and gates that had once defined a thriving community. What remains today is not only a set of ruins, but a series of unanswered questions about who built the city and why its story ended so quickly. Long after the city disappeared from the landscape, the silent stones of Khirbet Qeiyafa began raising questions that the ancient builders never left behind answers to. The silent summit of Mount Nebo. Perched atop the edge of the Dead Sea, Masada dominates the horizon with its sheer cliffs and sun-baked plateau, concealing the remnants of an ancient fortress built to withstand both nature and man. From this vantage point, the surrounding desert stretches endlessly, the harsh terrain serving as both a natural barrier and a silent witness to the centuries that have passed. Even today, the jagged cliffs seem to guard the secrets of those who once occupied the fortress, as though the plateau itself retains a memory of the lives and choices made above its rocky foundation. Travellers who approach the site can sense an almost palpable stillness, a quiet that contrasts sharply with the violent history embedded in every stone. Herod the Great chose this desolate ridge to transform into a palace fortress, combining luxury, defensive architecture, and the ingenious use of hidden cisterns to secure life in a desert landscape. He envisioned a refuge that could endure both political upheaval and the extreme environment of the Judean desert. The palace terraces, storerooms, and bath complexes were carved into the plateau itself, creating a self-contained citadel designed for comfort and defense. Every aspect of the fortress seems calculated to withstand prolonged isolation, from its carefully placed water reservoirs to the intricate network of walls that shielded its inhabitants from the unforgiving sun and potential invaders. Ingenious channels and subterranean reservoirs allowed rainwater to be captured and stored, ensuring that the fortress could endure long periods of isolation while hiding the scale of its water system from view. Massive cisterns carved directly into the bedrock could hold enough water to support hundreds of residents for months. Seasonal floods collected through stone-lined channels filled these reservoirs with life-giving water, an invisible lifeline that guaranteed survival even if the surrounding valleys were cut off. The precision required to carve these systems into the desert rock reflects not only engineering skill, but a calculated anticipation of siege, drought, and disaster. For decades after its construction, Masada remained a silent sentinel over the Judean desert, a place of preparation awaiting a purpose that history had yet to reveal. The plateau stood empty, its buildings untouched by the footfalls of a permanent population, yet fully equipped for the arrival of those seeking refuge or defense. Over time, the fortress became a symbol of quiet endurance, an enigmatic monument that seemed to watch over the Dead Sea with deliberate patience. Its stillness allowed observers to imagine the layers of history hidden in every corner, waiting to tell stories of power, isolation, and human resolve. When the Jewish rebels seized the plateau during the First Jewish-Roman War, the fortress transformed into a bastion of resistance, where isolation became both protection and imprisonment. A small community of fighters and their families made the fortress their home, occupying the palace rooms, storerooms, and fortified walls. The strategic advantage of Masada's position became suddenly apparent, as the cliffs and limited access points created a natural defense against the superior numbers of the Roman legions. The defenders adapted quickly, using the plateau's resources to sustain life and prepare for the inevitable siege. Roman legions eventually arrived, establishing massive camps around the cliffs and building an enormous siege ramp that would challenge the defenders' ingenuity and resolve. The Romans laboured for months, transporting stones, earth and timber to construct a wide ramp that could eventually bring their siege engines within reach of the fortress walls. The scale of this undertaking reflects both the determination of the Roman army and the extraordinary difficulty of overcoming a fortress designed to exploit the natural geography of the plateau. Each day, the sounds of construction echoed up the cliffs, a reminder of the relentless pressure building against the isolated defenders. Inside the fortress, families and warriors organised daily routines around limited resources, relying on stored provisions while tension grew with every sound echoing from the valley below. Cooks prepared meals from carefully rationed grains, warriors inspected walls and defensive positions, and children moved cautiously among the stone structures that had become both home and prison. The psychological weight of isolation, combined with the constant threat from the approaching Roman army, created a tense atmosphere where every choice carried consequences. Even simple acts like fetching water from cisterns or tending livestock became exercises in caution and endurance. Flavius Josephus described the defenders' grim final decision, a narrative of mass suicide that remains debated, while archaeological evidence of hearths, storage jars and tools provides fragments of life in the fortress's final hours. The physical remains of Masada suggest a community prepared for resistance to the very end, with evidence of planned food storage, weapon preparation and domestic organisation. Yet the silence that greeted the Romans at the moment of conquest has fueled centuries of speculation. How did the inhabitants face the knowledge of inevitable defeat, and what rituals, if any, marked their final hours on the plateau? Centuries later, excavations revealed the surviving palace ruins, storerooms, and Roman siege remnants, offering physical confirmation of the dramatic confrontation, yet leaving many questions unanswered about what truly occurred. Archaeologists uncovered mosaics, frescoes, and remnants of monumental architecture, alongside fragments of pottery, coins, and tools, each artifact a small piece of the larger puzzle. Despite these discoveries, the human story of Masada remains incomplete. The choices, fears, and experiences of the defenders are preserved only in traces and conjecture, the fortress itself standing as a monument to both ingenuity and tragedy. Even under the scorching sun and relentless desert winds, the plateau holds the echoes of human struggle, the silence above the Dead Sea a reminder of a fortress whose final moments remain shrouded in mystery. Visitors today can walk the ancient pathways, trace the remains of palace terraces, and gaze down upon the Roman siege ramp, yet the atmosphere retains a sense of solemnity, as if the land itself remembers what transpired on this remote desert peak. The desert winds carry a timeless quiet, whispering across stone walls and empty rooms, leaving only the imagination to fill the spaces between history and legend. The plateau still watches over the desert, as though guarding secrets of Masada that time itself has been unable to erase.